My son and his beautiful wife were hosting my 72nd birthday party in their sprawling Outer Banks estate. Champagne was flowing, jazz was playing, 175 guests were smiling at me. It should have been the happiest night of my life. Then my wife Loretta leaned in close and breathed 5 words into my ear that turned my blood to ice. Take the keys. We are leaving. Act like nothing is wrong. I figured she was having a senior moment right up until she pulled me into the coat closet, turned the lock, and thrust a lit-up iPad inches from my face. "Look at this," she hissed. What that screen showed me reached into my chest and ripped my heart clean out. A text exchange between my daughter-in-law and some contact saved only as the doctor. The final message stopped me cold. The dosage in his wine is lethal. Wait 20 minutes after he collapses before calling 911. It will look like a natural heart attack. Right then it hit me this gathering had nothing to do with celebrating a birthday. It was a wake, and the man laid out in that casket was meant to be me. My name is Ezra Dunbar. Welcome back to Honor Revenge Stories, where real betrayal, real survival, and hard-earned justice take center stage. If these stories move you, I hope you'll consider subscribing and leaving a like. It means more than you know. And before we go any further, drop a comment and tell me what you're up to right now. Are you driving, cooking dinner, lying in bed after a long day? I always love knowing who's with me. One quick note, some elements of this story have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to specific real persons or events is coincidental. The truth at the heart of it, though, that part is very real. It started on a humid Saturday evening in late August. My son Cade and his wife Sloane had insisted on throwing this gala. They called it a tribute to my legacy, a celebration of the man who climbed from military logistics officer to the head of a construction empire. Me, I wanted a backyard barbecue with my old Army brothers. What I got instead was a black tie affair at their 3-story secluded mansion swallowed up by dense forest. I stood in the middle of the ballroom, stuffed into a tuxedo that felt more like a straitjacket. I scanned the room. Not one familiar face. Hedge fund managers, tech money, real estate sharks. Sloane's crowd, not mine. They looked at me with that practiced civility people reserve for the elderly, shook my hand, called me Sir Eyes, already drifting past me to someone worth their time. I went looking for my son. Cade was parked near the bar, working his way through a scotch. He looked pale. Sweat glistened on his forehead, despite the air conditioning running full blast. He kept stealing glances at his watch. My boy was always soft. I tried my best to change that. I tried to show him what a dollar was worth, what a firm handshake meant. He preferred the shortcut. He preferred the comfortable life my sweat had built. Watching him fidget and sweat across that ballroom, I felt a knot of disappointment settle deep in my gut that nothing was going to loosen. Then I spotted her. Sloane, my daughter-in-law. She was gliding through the crowd in a crimson velvet dress that looked like it cost more than my first house. Perfect hostess, radiant, touching elbows and laughing at weak jokes. A predator wrapped in velvet. I never trusted her. From the night Cade first brought her home 5 years ago, I caught something cold living behind those blue eyes. But Cade loved her, or she had him in a grip he couldn't break. So, I bit my tongue. I paid for the wedding. I paid for the house. I played the supportive father. Sloane caught my gaze from across the room, and her smile stretched wide, but it stopped well short of her eyes. She plucked 2 crystal glasses off a passing tray and moved toward me. The crowd peeled back like she owned the floor. "Dad." Her voice rang out warm enough for the nearby guests to catch every word. "You look handsome tonight. The birthday boy deserves a proper toast." She extended one of the glasses. The liquid inside was a deep, rich crimson. "This is a very rare vintage," she said, drawing closer. "Cade and I set it aside just for tonight. It's from the year you founded your company. I want you to drink it all, Dad. To your health, to your legacy." She pressed the glass into my palm. Her fingers were ice cold. I studied the wine. It moved in the glass dark and dense. I glanced at Cade. He was locked onto us from the bar, squeezing his glass so hard I half expected it to crack. He looked one breath away from being sick. "Drink up, Ezra," a man beside me said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "It's a celebration." I brought the rim toward my lips. The smell was earthy with something metallic underneath. Almonds, maybe, or chemicals. I was a half second from tasting it when something slammed hard into my side. Oh my goodness, I am so clumsy. Loretta, my wife of 50 years. She had stumbled into me with her full weight. Her shoulder caught my arm, and the crystal glass went spinning. It hit the marble floor and exploded. Dark red wine fanned out across the tiles, soaking the white hem of Sloane's expensive dress. "Oh no," Loretta cried, hand over her mouth. "I tripped on my gown. I'm so sorry. Look at this mess." For just a sliver of a second, the mask dropped. Sloane's face twisted into something ugly, pure, unfiltered fury. Eyes wide, lips peeled back. She stared at the wine spreading across the floor with a desperation that made no sense for a spilled drink. Like she'd just watched her whole world go up in smoke. Then the mask snapped back into place. She pushed out a laugh that had no warmth behind it. "It's okay, Mom," she said, her voice pulled tight. "Accidents happen. It was just wine. I'll fetch another glass." "No," Loretta said, firm as iron, her grip on my arm stronger than I'd felt in years. "Look at his tuxedo. Azy, you're damp and you're shaking. You look flushed. Come with me. We need to get you cleaned up before the speeches." But Loretta, I felt perfectly fine. A few drops on my shoe at most. She drove her fingernails into my bicep, deep enough to hurt. I said, "Come with me, Ezra. Now." She didn't wait. She steered me through the crowd. Glancing back, I saw Sloane flagging down a waiter, whispering something fast and urgent. Cade had turned to face the wall. Loretta marched me past the bathrooms, past the kitchen, all the way to the master suite on the first floor, the guest wing where we were meant to stay the weekend. "Loretta, what has gotten into you?" I said as we stepped inside. "That was rude. Sloane is going to be furious." Loretta didn't answer. She slammed the heavy oak door and threw the deadbolt. Then she shoved a big armchair up against it. "Loretta, stop," I said, pulling my arm free. "You're acting like you've lost your mind." "What is going on?" She turned to face me. Her eyes were wide and full of terror, breathing hard like she'd just sprinted a mile. She didn't say a word. Instead, she reached into the deep pocket of her shawl and produced an iPad. Sloane's. I recognized the rose gold case. "I found it sitting on the kitchen counter," Loretta whispered. She left it unlocked while she was dressing down the catering staff. A notification came up on the screen. "Ez, you need to see this." She thrust the tablet into my hands, her own trembling so badly she nearly fumbled it. I looked down. An encrypted messaging app conversation open, between Sloane and a contact labeled Dr. Crane. I scrolled upward. My stomach fell out from under me. 3 days ago, Sloane had written, "Is the mixture undetectable in an autopsy?" Dr. Crane replied, "Yes, provided he has a history of high blood pressure. The compound mimics cardiac arrest. It breaks down in the bloodstream within an hour." Sloane wrote, "Perfect. He takes blood pressure meds. We'll do it at the party. Too much excitement. Old heart gives out. It's a tragedy, not a crime." The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the dresser to hold myself upright. I scrolled to today. 10 minutes ago. Sloane had written, "I have the glass ready. I am giving it to him now." Dr. Crane replied, "Make sure he drinks it all. Once he ingests it, you have about 5 minutes before he feels dizzy. Then he drops. Wait 20 minutes. Do not call 911 immediately. If they revive him, we are all dead." I raised my eyes to Loretta, the woman who had dressed my wounds when I came home from overseas, the woman who had stayed beside me when we had nothing. She was weeping without a sound. "That wine," she whispered. "It wasn't wine, Ez. It was poison. She tried to kill you right there in front of everybody." I looked toward the door. I thought about Cade, my son, my own blood. He'd been standing there watching. He knew. "Cade," I muttered. "He wouldn't. He couldn't be part of this." Loretta took the iPad back and opened another app, a banking app. "Look," she said. I looked. A joint account I'd never seen before. Cade and Sloane's names on it. The balance was negative $2 million. And there was a pending transaction set for Monday morning, a transfer request for $5 million. The source of funds was listed as Ezra Dunbar Life Insurance Payout. "They already spent the money," Loretta said, her voice shaking with rage. "They bet against your life, Ez. They need you dead tonight to cover their debts tomorrow." A cold calm moved through me. Same feeling I used to get before a supply run through hostile territory. The fear burned off, replaced by a clean, hard clarity. "They're not just in debt," I said, my voice low and steady. "They're cornered, and cornered people make mistakes." "We have to call the police," Loretta said, reaching for the room phone. I caught her hand. "No," I said. "Look at the signal bars on the iPad. Nothing. And the room phone?" I lifted the receiver. Dead silence. The line had been cut. "They're jamming the signal," I said. "This isn't a party, Loretta. It's a trap. We're in the middle of the woods, miles from the nearest neighbor. The gates are electric. Every member of that staff was hired by Sloan. Someone tried the door handle. It rattled hard. Mom, Dad, are you in there?" Sloan's voice, sweet as syrup, poured over razor blades. "Ez isn't feeling well, Sloan," Loretta called back, her voice remarkably steady. "He needs to rest." "Oh no," Sloan replied. "Open the door, Loretta. I have some water for him, and Dr. Hollis Crane is here at the party. He can take a look." I caught Loretta's eye. We both understood exactly who Dr. Hollis Crane probably was. The man behind those text messages. "We're fine, Sloan," I called through the door. "Give us a minute." Silence. Then Sloan's voice shifted. The syrup drained right out of it, leaving something hard and cold underneath. "Open the door, Ez. Don't make a scene. You don't want to ruin the party, do you?" I took stock of the room. First floor, but the windows were reinforced storm glass. One way out through that door or through the adjoining study. I took Loretta by both shoulders. "Listen to me. We are not drinking anything, we are not eating anything, and we are not sitting in this room waiting for them to try again." "We have to run," Loretta whispered. I nodded. I checked my pockets. I had my pocket knife, a small folding knife with a rosewood handle, a retirement gift from my foreman, a habit carried over from the old days. Not much of a weapon against a house full of people who wanted me in the ground, but it was something. I looked at the iPad one last time and noticed a file folder labeled the exit plan. I tapped it. A PDF opened. It was a certificate of cremation, pre-filled, dated for tomorrow. They weren't planning to bury me. They were going to burn the evidence. My heart turned to stone. The door handle rattled again. "Loretta," I said quietly, "put your shoes on. We're heading to the garage. If I could reach the car I'd restored for Cade, maybe we could ram the gate." "What if they try to stop us?" she asked. I picked up the heavy brass lamp from the bedside table, tested its weight in my hand. "I am 72 years old," I said. "I fought in a war. I built a company from the ground up. I raised a son. I will be damned if I let a soccer mom and a gambling addict put me down with a glass of poison wine. We are leaving, Loretta, and if anyone steps in front of us, I am going to give them a lesson in old-school logistics." I shoved the armchair aside, brass lamp in one hand, Loretta's hand in the other. "Ready?" I asked. She wiped her eyes and nodded. I threw the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Sloan was standing right there, holding a tray with a glass of water and 2 pills. Behind her stood 2 men I had never seen before, big, thick-necked, stuffed into security uniforms that didn't quite fit. "Time for your medicine, Dad," Sloan said with a smile. I didn't return it. "I think I'll pass on the medication, Sloan," I said, stepping into the hallway. "The party is over," and that was when the real nightmare began. We moved through the service hallway like ghosts. My hand was locked around Loretta's wrist, her pulse hammering fast and erratic against my fingers, a rhythm that matched the dread sitting heavy in my own chest. We skirted the ballroom, where the jazz band was working through a cover of Nat King Cole. The music sounded warped now, like a funeral dirge played at the wrong speed. We slipped out the side door into the night. The air hit us like a wet cloth, thick with humidity, and the smell of rain coming in fast. The Outer Banks woods beyond the manicured lawn were solid black. The only light came from the security floods buzzing overhead, throwing long, hard shadows across the gravel driveway. My destination was my pride and joy, a 1968 Ford Torino GT that I had restored with my own hands. I'd given it to Cade as a gift 5 years ago, but I kept a spare set of keys. That machine had no computer chips, no GPS tracking, just raw American steel and horsepower. If we could reach it, we could punch through the front gate before anyone knew we'd moved. "There it is," Loretta whispered, pointing to the dark shape sitting in the third bay of the garage. We crossed the gravel fast, each footstep cracking in the silence like a small caliber round. I dug in my pocket for the keys. My fingers weren't cooperating. I told myself it was the arthritis. I knew better. It was fear not for me, but for the woman beside me. I worked the key into the door lock and turned it. The heavy door groaned open. "Get in," I hissed. "Get low." Loretta dropped into the passenger seat. I slid behind the wheel. Old leather and gasoline, a smell that usually settled my nerves. Tonight it just smelled like a trap. I pumped the gas twice and hit the ignition. The engine came alive with a deep guttural roar that vibrated the concrete under us. For one brief second, hope surged through me. We were going to make it. I dropped it into reverse and floored the pedal. The car lurched back a few inches, then stopped hard with a sickening metallic grind. The engine screamed, but we weren't going anywhere. "What's happening?" Loretta grabbed the dash. I shifted to drive. Nothing, just shuddering. I killed the engine and kicked the door open, ran to the back of the car. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. A massive black SUV was parked crossways behind the garage door, completely sealing us in. One of the guests' vehicles, or one of the hired muscle. No way out. But that wasn't even the worst of it. I looked down at the Torino's rear tires. They weren't flat. They were shredded. Someone had gone at the sidewalls with a hunting knife. The rubber hung in ribbons. I sprinted to the front tires. Same thing. "They knew," I whispered. "They knew we'd try to run." "Ez, look." Loretta was pointing toward the main gate at the far end of the long driveway. Heavy wrought iron, a gate I'd paid $20,000 to have installed. Electronic. I ran to the keypad on the stone pillar and punched in the master code. 1971, the year I met Loretta. 3 beeps, red light, access denied. I tried again. Access denied. I drove my fist into the cold stone. They changed the code. We are locked in. Then the floodlights above the garage snapped to full brightness, washing everything in harsh white. I threw my arm across my eyes. "Going somewhere, Dad." The voice drifted out of the shadows near the house. I squinted into the glare. Cade stepped forward into the light. My son, still holding the scotch glass empty now, tuxedo shirt open at the collar tie hanging loose. He looked like a man fighting to keep his dinner down, sweating hard despite the cool night air, eyes jumping to the trees, to the ground, anywhere except my face. "Cade," I said, keeping my voice level. "Open the gate. Your mother isn't well. We need to get to a hospital." Cade shook his head and stepped back like he thought I might swing at him. "You can't leave, Dad," he stammered. "The party, the guests. It would look bad. Everyone's waiting for the speech. Just come back inside. Please don't make this difficult." I looked at him. Really looked. I saw the little boy who used to crawl into bed with us when it thundered. I saw the teenager who wrecked my truck and couldn't find the nerve to tell me. And now, I saw a 40-year-old man so buried in debt and fear that he'd sell his own parents to dig himself out. "Open the gate, Cade." I barked my command voice, the one that used to snap 200 construction workers to attention. Cade flinched. His hand went into his pocket. For a moment, I thought he was reaching for a remote. Then a hand dropped onto his shoulder, manicured, red nails. Sloane stepped out from behind him. No smile this time. Her face was all hard angles under the floodlights, like a marble carving of something malevolent. "Dad," she said, smooth and dangerous. "You're confusing, Cade. You know how you get when you miss your medication. You become paranoid." "I am not paranoid, Sloane," I said, moving in front of Loretta. "I am seeing things more clearly than I have in years. I see the slashed tires. I see the blocked driveway. And I see a daughter-in-law who is a great deal more interested in my life insurance than in my life." Sloane exhaled, slow, theatrical, deliberate. She turned to Cade. "See, honey, I told you the dementia is progressing faster than we thought. He's hallucinating. He thinks we're trying to hurt him." Sloane snapped her fingers. From the darkness behind the garage, the 2 big men from the hallway materialized. The blazers were gone now, exposing thick tattooed arms. One of them had a heavy flashlight gripped like a club. "Escort my in-laws back to the living room," Sloane ordered, "and make sure they don't wander off again, for their own safety, of course." The men moved toward us. I looked at Cade. He was staring at the gravel tears cutting down his face. "Cade," I said quietly, "look at me, son. If you let them walk me back into that house, I am not walking out again. You know that." Cade's head came up. His lips started to move. "Cade!" Sloane's voice snapped like a whip. "Remember the bank. Remember Monday morning. We don't have a choice." Cade shut his mouth. He held my gaze for one last hollow second, then turned away. I felt Loretta's fists bunched into the back of my jacket. She was shaking hard. I assessed the 2 guards. I assessed the dark tree line. I ran the numbers. Maybe I could put one of them down. Not both. Not with Loretta standing beside me. Fighting here just meant getting beaten and dragged back inside, or worse, finished right there on the gravel and written off as a robbery gone wrong. I raised my hand slowly. "Fine," I said. "We'll go back in." "Smart choice," Sloane said. The smile reappeared instantly artificial and terrifying. Fix your tie, Dad. You have a speech to give. Try to smile. We are celebrating your life after all, however long or short it may be. The guards seized our arms with bruising grips and marched us back toward the house, back into the music and the laughter and the poison. As I stepped through the kitchen door, I looked back at the gate one final time. It wasn't a gate anymore. It was the seal on a tomb. The door clicked shut behind us, and the truth landed with full weight. We were not guests at a party. We were prisoners in a slaughterhouse, and the butcher was wearing a crimson velvet dress. The walk back to the living room was the longest of my life. A man who smelled of stale tobacco and barely contained violence had my arm in a vice. To the guests watching us, I probably looked like a frail old man being steadied by an attentive staff member. The jazz band had shifted to something upbeat and brassy, a number that clashed brutally with the cold dread pooling in my gut. Faces drifted past, business partners, neighbors, all of them smiling and sipping champagne, completely blind to the kidnapping unfolding in front of them. Sloane moved ahead of us, clapping her hands softly for attention, light voice carrying effortlessly over the music. "Everyone, please don't worry," she announced, projecting a look of warm concern that made my skin crawl. "Dad is just having a little spell. Too much excitement for one night. We're going to get him settled in the guest suite for a rest. Please enjoy the hors d'oeuvres." She played the concerned daughter-in-law so convincingly I nearly wanted to applaud. A few guests nodded with sympathy. Poor old Ez, probably thinking he's finally losing his grip. That was her move, discredit the target before he can open his mouth. If I'd called out for help right then, I would have looked exactly like the confused, senile old man she'd already painted me as. So I kept quiet. I let them march me and Loretta down the hallway past the family photographs that now looked like a gallery of lies and back into the guest suite. The door closed behind us. Then came the sound that carries the same meaning in every language, the heavy metallic thud of a deadbolt driving home. Loretta went straight to the window and pulled the thick velvet curtains aside. Outside stood another man in a dark suit, arms folded back to the glass, watching the garden. "We're trapped, Ez," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "They really did it. They locked us in." I sat down hard on the edge of the king-sized bed. My knees were on fire. The adrenaline was bleeding away, leaving a deep bone-level exhaustion in its wake. I took in the room, cream and gold, expensive, tasteful. A beautiful cage. I pressed my rough hands against my face, trying to scrub away the image of the Cade in that driveway, the way he couldn't hold my eyes, the shame and the fear living in his face. "Why, Ez?" Loretta sat down beside me and took my hand. "Why would Cade do this? He is our son. We gave him everything." I closed my eyes, and just like that, I was back in my office 4 weeks ago. The memory was sharp enough to draw blood. Cade had come to see me, not the polished host in a tuxedo, but a wreck, bloodshot eyes, reeking of nervous sweat. "Dad, I need a loan," he'd said. $2 million. I'd actually laughed, thought he was joking. He wasn't. He had leveraged his own construction firm, the one I helped him launch, to buy into a cryptocurrency scheme that had cratered overnight. And on top of that, he'd borrowed money from people who don't send lawyers when they want it back. I told him no. I told him that bailing him out would only enable him further. I said, sell the house, sell the cars, face your mess like a man. I thought I was teaching him something about accountability. I thought I was being a good father. I looked at Loretta now, and the realization struck me like a sledgehammer blow. "It's the debt," I said, my voice gone rough. "The $2 million plus whatever interest those men are charging. The ones outside aren't security guards, Loretta. They're loan sharks. Sloane didn't just hire them. She cut a deal with them. My life insurance pays out $5 million. That clears Cade's debt and leaves Sloane $3 million to walk away clean." Loretta pressed her hand over her mouth to hold back a sob. "So, that is what we are worth to them. A line item on a balance sheet." She stood up, wiping her eyes. She wasn't a woman who stayed down. 30 years as a nurse had burned that out of her. "I'm calling the police," she said, moving to the bedside phone. "I don't care if the line is dead. I'm trying." She picked up the receiver. Silence. She slammed it down and pulled out her cell phone, walking the perimeter of the room with it held high. "No service," she muttered. "Just searching. How is that possible, Ez? We always have signal in here." I looked up at the smoke detector on the ceiling. Its red light was blinking too fast, too rhythmic. "It's a jammer," I said. "A signal blocker, military grade and illegal as hell." Sloan must have paid a serious price for it. Creates a dead zone around the entire property, no calls in, no calls out, no data. Loretta's shoulders dropped. She went into the bathroom to splash water on her face. When she came back out, she looked even worse. "There's no hot water," she said. "And the towels are gone." I frowned. "Why cut the hot water?" "To keep us off balance," I said. "Psychological pressure. Or maybe they simply shut down the boiler to this wing. Why waste it on people they expect to be dead by morning?" Dead by morning. The phrase settled over the room like smoke. I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the grinding in my joints, and crossed to the heating vent near the baseboard, a large decorative grate painted to blend with the trim. I knelt and put my eye to the slats. Dark inside, but I felt a faint draw of air on my face. "I spent 40 years building houses," I said, running my fingers along the metal frame. "I know how this one breathes." Loretta lowered herself beside me. "What are you thinking, Ezzy?" "This vent," I said, tapping the grate. "Old-style wide duct system. I insisted on it when Cade built this place better airflow for central air. The main trunk runs straight up through the wall and splits into 2 branches. One goes to the master bedroom upstairs. The other branch runs to the study." "The study," Loretta repeated. "Cade's office." "Exactly. Cade's a gamer. He used to complain about Wi-Fi lag on his high-speed games, so he had a hardwired fiber optic line run directly into the study wall. It's a shielded cable. A jammer might not touch a hardwired connection, not if we can reach his computer. But the study is on the far side of the house," Loretta said, "and the door was locked. I pulled my pocket knife from my tuxedo pants, a small folding knife with a rosewood handle, a retirement gift from my foreman. No weapon of war, but a tool, and right now, a tool was worth more than a firearm. I drove the blade into the screw head, holding the vent cover in place. The paint had sealed it tight, but I twisted with every ounce of strength I had left. Paint flaked away. The screw turned. "We are not going through the door," I said through clenched teeth as it gave way. "We are going through the walls. First screw out, then the second." The metal grate dropped to the floor with a soft clatter. The opening was dark and dusty, tight a hard squeeze for a man my size, even after the weight I'd dropped. Loretta looked at the hole, then back at me. "Ez, you cannot be serious. You're back. You are 72 years old. You will get stuck in there." I looked at my wife. I saw the terror she was fighting to keep off her face. "I am not dying in this bedroom, Loretta," I said, shrugging off my tuxedo jacket and rolling up my sleeves. "And I am absolutely not letting that woman win. Here is what I need from you," I said. "Push my feet until I'm inside, then set the grate back in place so the guards don't spot it if they come through." "But what about me?" Her voice climbed. "You're leaving me in here by myself." I took her face between my hands. 10 minutes. I am going to crawl to the study. I am going to send an email to the one person I trust outside these walls. Then I am coming back for you. I swear it." She nodded, tears breaking loose. "Go, before they come back." I got down on my stomach and pulled myself into the dark metal throat of the house. The dust hit me like a fist-thick choking. I held my breath. The metal was ice cold against my chest. I worked my elbows, dragging myself forward an inch at a time. My shoulders burned in protest. The space pressed in from all sides, tight as a coffin. Through the ductwork, I could hear the muffled sounds of the party laughter, the clink of crystal, the low pulse of music. Surreal. A few feet away, people were toasting my life while I was crawling through filth to save it. I reached a junction. Left climbed toward the master bedroom. Right led to the study. I went right. The pitch was steep. I dug my toes into the seams of the metal and shoved forward. My mind drifted to Cade, to the little boy I taught to ride a bike in our driveway. How did we get here? How had I missed it? Was I too hard or not hard enough? The questions gnawed at me, cutting through the physical pain. Then voices stopped me cold. Coming through the duct ahead, loud and clean, the metal, acting like an amplifier. I froze. I was sitting directly beneath the study vent. I pressed flat and listened. It was Cade, and he wasn't alone. "You can't do this, Sloan." Cade's voice was high and cracking, sliding toward hysteria. "He is my father. The poison, you said it would be painless. You said he would just go to sleep." I heard liquid being poured, ice hitting glass. "Grow up, Cade." Sloan's voice was calm, terrifyingly casual. "Painless for him, profitable for us. Do you want to lose the house? Do you want to go to jail for fraud? Because that is what happens if we don't have that insurance money by Monday. A heavy sigh. But the body, Cade whispered. The autopsy. I told you? Sloane's voice sharpened. Dr. Hollis Crane is the coroner for this county. Why do you think we invited him tonight? He signs the death certificate. Cause of death, heart failure. Cremation scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. By the time anyone starts asking questions, your father will be ash in a jar. My blood went cold. The plan was deeper than I'd understood. They had the coroner in their pocket. I had to reach that computer. I had to get word to someone outside this circle. I eased forward without a sound until I was directly below the study vent. Thin blades of light cut up through the slats. I reached up to push the grate. It was loose. Thank God. Then the doorknob turned. Someone else entering the room. Well, well, well. A deep voice filled the space, not the guards. It sounded like Dr. Hollis Crane. Is the patient ready for his final checkup? I froze my hand hanging inches from the grate. One movement and they'd see me. One sound and it was finished. I lay there in the dark, listening to them map out my death, praying my old joints wouldn't betray me with a crack. The darkness inside that shaft pressed down like a physical weight. I am 72 years old. My knees are titanium replacements. My lower back has been wrecked since I was hauling supply crates in '79. And now, I was army crawling through a galvanized steel tunnel. I had spec'd and installed myself 20 years ago. Every inch was a fight. The screw heads on the floor of the duct chewed into my elbows. The dust coated my throat and begged me to cough. I swallowed it back hard. Coughing meant death. I kept pulling myself forward, breathing in short, shallow draws. The tuxedo was destroyed. The Italian shoes were shrieking against the metal. I didn't care about any of that. I cared about the voices coming through the ductwork like they were standing next to me. I reached the junction directly above Cade's study. Light sliced up through the vent cover slats, catching the swirling dust in thin, pale beams. I stopped moving entirely, lay still, shoulders screaming, and pressed my ear to the cold metal. The voices were clear, terrifyingly clear. You said he would just sleep, Cade was saying, his voice stretched thin and high with panic. You told me the pills were a heavy sedative. You said we'd put him in the car, get him to the hospital, claim a stroke, and go for power of attorney. You never said anything about stopping his heart. I squeezed my eyes shut. My son. He thought he was agreeing to incapacitate me, not kill me. Small comfort, but comfort. He was weak. He was a coward, but he wasn't a murderer. Not yet. Oh, grow up, Cade. Sloane's voice cut through his panic like a blade. She sounded bored, annoyed, like she was walking a slow student through arithmetic. Power of attorney takes months. The courts get involved. Your father has lawyers who would fight us at every turn. We do not have months, Cade. We have until Monday morning. I heard pacing, leather soles on hardwood. If that wire transfer doesn't clear by 9 a.m., the loan sharks are going to break your legs, Sloane continued. And after they finish with your legs, they will come for me. Do you think I'm going to let some Russian thugs ruin my face because you are too sentimental to do what needs to be done? But he is my father. Cade sobbed. Then the sound of shattering glass. He'd hurled his drink against the wall. I can't do it, Sloane. I cannot stand there and watch him die. We have to call 911. Maybe it's not too late. Silence, long, heavy, the kind that raises the hair on the back of your neck. Then Sloane spoke again, barely above a whisper but carrying more menace than a shout. You are not calling anyone. If he wakes up, we go to prison. Do you understand that attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy? We lose the house. We lose the cars. We lose everything. The only path out of this runs through the funeral home. Now, stop crying and go downstairs. Make sure none of the guests come up here. I need to print the final documents. A door slammed. Cade was gone. I lay there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs like something trapped. Sloane was still in the room below me. I could hear her fingers on a keyboard. I had to get down there. I had to see what she was printing. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The typing stopped. Then the heavy oak door swung open and clicked shut, heels on the hallway floor fading away. She was gone. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't. I drove my fingers into the slats of the vent cover. It wasn't screwed in. I had designed those vents with magnetic latches for easy cleaning. Thank God for that obsession of mine. I pushed. The grate popped free. I slid it clear. I looked down. 8 feet to the top of a bookshelf, then another drop to the floor below. I swung my legs through the opening. I dangled by my fingertips for a moment, every old muscle in my body screaming at me, and then I released. I hit the bookshelf with a thud that rang through the silent room like a shot. I went still waiting for an alarm, waiting for footsteps. Nothing. I climbed down to the floor. The study was exactly as I remembered it. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, the mingled scent of expensive cigars and aged paper. But on the massive mahogany desk in the center of the room sat a stack of documents that had no business being there. I crossed to the desk fast. My hands were shaking as I lifted the top folder. It was labeled simply Project Omega. I opened it. The first page was a life insurance policy. My policy, the one I'd taken out 10 years ago to protect Loretta. But the beneficiary line had been altered. Loretta's name was crossed out. In its place, typed in crisp black letters, was the Cade and Sloan Vreeland Revocable Trust. I turned the page. A deed transfer from my construction company. Every one of my shares, 100%, signed over to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. And at the bottom of the page was my signature. I stared at it. It was flawless. The loop on the I, the sharp slant of the T, it was my signature. But I had never put pen to that paper. I glanced at the desk. Next to the computer sat a notepad covered in dozens of practice attempts. Someone had spent hours tracing my hand, rehearsing the forgery stroke by stroke. It wasn't Cade. His handwriting was a disaster like a doctor's scrawl. This was precise, calculated. This was Sloan. A wave of nausea rolled through me. This wasn't desperation or a crime of passion. This was a hostile takeover. She had been engineering this for months, maybe years. She had studied me. She had studied my business. She intended to erase me from the face of the earth and strip away everything I had ever built for my family. I grabbed the folder. I had to take it. This was the evidence. I reached for the computer mouse to wake the screen. I needed to fire off an email to my lawyer, get this information beyond the jammer's reach. But the instant my hand touched that mouse, I heard it. The click of the door handle. Someone was coming back. I looked up at the vent, 10 feet overhead, unreachable. I checked the window barred with decorative ironwork. The footsteps were right outside the door. My eyes swept the room in a panic. The desk too exposed. The curtains too sheer. The closet. A walk-in cedar closet where Cade stored his winter coats. 10 feet away. I lunged for it. My bad knee buckled, but I drove myself forward. I slipped inside just as the study door swung open. I eased the closet door shut, leaving a sliver of gap just wide enough to see through. I held my breath. I pressed my palm over my mouth to smother the sound of my own wheezing. Sloan walked into the room. She wasn't alone. She was talking on a burner phone pacing in front of the desk. "Yes, Dr. Hollis Crane," she said. "The old man is secured. The wife is with him. No, she didn't drink the wine, but we'll handle her. A tragic fall down the stairs in her grief. Yes, 2 bodies are harder to explain, but we have no choice now. My blood went cold. They weren't just going to kill me. They were going to kill Loretta, too." Sloan stopped at the desk. She frowned. She reached out and touched the folder I had been holding. I'd left it slightly askew. She paused. Her eyes moved across the room, the bookshelves, the window. Then her gaze stopped cold. She was looking directly at the closet door. I stopped breathing. I stopped thinking. I simply wrapped my fingers around the handle of my pocket knife in my sweat-slick palm and waited for the devil to pull that door open. I barely made it back to the bedroom before the lock turned. I dropped from the vent, every joint screaming, and Loretta shoved the grate back into place just as the heavy oak door swung open. I collapsed onto the bed, working to slow my breathing, trying to look like a man rousing from a nap rather than a man who had just crawled through the bones of his own house to uncover his own murder. Sloan stood in the doorway. She had changed her dress. The wine-stained silk was gone, replaced by a sharp black evening gown that made her look every inch the widow she planned to be by morning. "Dinner is served," she said. Her voice was flat stripped of the counterfeit warmth she'd offered earlier. "We're not hungry," Loretta said, planting herself between me and Sloan. "We just want to go home." "Sit down," Sloan snapped. Not shouting, but the command landed like the crack of a whip. "You will come downstairs, you will eat dinner, and you will smile. We've sent the other guests home. It's just family now, an intimate celebration." She turned to the 2 guards stationed behind her. "Escort them." We were marched down the grand staircase like prisoners of war. The house had gone eerily silent. The jazz band was gone. The catering staff had vanished. The only sounds were the click of Sloane's heels on the marble floor and the heavy breathing of the guards at our backs. The dining room was set for 4, crystal glasses, silverware gleaming beneath the chandelier. It looked like a spread from a lifestyle magazine and felt like an execution chamber. Cade was already seated staring into an empty wine glass. He looked worse than before. His skin had gone gray and his hands trembled so badly he'd had to lace them together on the table. He didn't look up when we came in. "Sit," Sloane commanded, pointing toward the head of the table. I sat. Loretta took the seat to my right. Sloane settled across from me. Cade was on my left, close enough to touch, but he felt a world away. The guards posted themselves at the door, arms folded. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Sloane said, shaking out her napkin. "We've prepared a special soup for you, Dad. Black truffle consommé. It's your favorite, isn't it?" She didn't wait for an answer. She rose and moved to the sideboard, where a silver tureen sat steaming. She didn't let the staff serve. She did it herself. She ladled the dark liquid into a bowl. I watched her hand, steady, surgical. She set the bowl in front of me. "Eat up," she said. "It'll make you feel better." The smell reached me immediately. Rich truffle, the weight of the broth, and something else underneath it. Something faint and bitter hiding beneath the garlic and herbs. It smelled like the chemical death I'd read about in the doctor's text messages. I looked at the soup. I looked at Loretta. Her eyes were fixed on the bowl, wide with terror. She gave the smallest shake of her head, a motion so slight only a husband of 50 years could read it. "Don't eat." I looked at Cade. He was sweating, his gaze nailed to that bowl. He knew. I picked up my spoon. My hand was shaking. This time, I didn't need to fake it. The rage vibrating through my bones was enough to rattle the silver against the china on its own. "I can't," I said, my voice breaking. "My stomach, Sloane. I'm not feeling well." Sloane's eyes tightened. "Eat the soup, Ezra. It cost a fortune. You don't want to be rude, do you?" I raised the spoon. I brought it halfway to my lips. I saw Sloane lean forward, anticipation pulling her jaw taut. She was hungry for it, hungry to watch the life leave my eyes. I let the tremor in my hand take over. I amplified it. My arm spasmed hard. The spoon flew. I lurched forward and my hand swept the bowl clean off the table. The hot, thick liquid arced across the tablecloth and splashed directly onto Sloane's chest and lap. She screamed, a high, piercing sound of shock and pain. She shot to her feet, knocking her chair over behind her. "You clumsy old fool!" she shrieked, clawing at the steaming consommé soaking into her black dress. "Look what you did!" I sat there, hands still trembling, feigning shock. "Oh, I'm so sorry. My hands. I can't control them." Sloane didn't hear me. The mask was gone completely now. The polished hostess had dissolved, replaced by something snarling and exposed. Her face was twisted into a rictus of pure hatred. "Stop acting!" she screamed, lunging toward me. "You're doing this on purpose, you useless, senile old baggage. Pick up the bowl and eat it." She grabbed my shoulder, her nails driving into my jacket. "Eat the damn soup, you old bastard! Die already!" "Just die?" The room went dead silent. The guards shifted uneasily. Even men who do evil for a living get uncomfortable when the mask comes off that violently. Cade looked up, his mouth hanging open. "Sloane," he whispered. "Shut up, Cade." Sloane wheeled on him, her eyes wild. "Shut your mouth. Make him eat or I'll pour it down his throat myself." I looked at my son. He was collapsing into his chair, terrified of his wife, terrified of his father, terrified of the creature he had chosen to marry. Something inside me broke open. The soldier woke up. The father shattered. I got to my feet, not like an old man rising from a chair, like a tank commander mounting his vehicle. I turned to Cade. I didn't give Sloane a single glance. I let her scream into empty air. My eyes were fixed on my son and nothing else. I pulled back my hand and I slapped him. Not a gentle rebuke, a hard, open-handed blow that caught his cheekbone with a crack like a pistol shot. Cade's head snapped sideways. He nearly went out of his chair. He stared at me with his hand pressed to his face, his eyes flooding with stunned tears. "Dad," he whimpered. "You let her talk to me like that." I roared, my voice rolling off the paneled walls. I leveled a finger at his face, a finger that had laid foundations for skyscrapers and directed men in combat. "I changed your diapers, Cade. I paid for your education. I built a legacy with my bare hands and set it at your feet. And you sit there like a coward and let this woman scream in my face. You let her wish me dead at my own dinner table." I leaned until my face was inches from his. Where is your honor, boy? Where is your spine? Did I raise a man or did I raise a pet? Cade stared at me. For the first time that entire night, he truly saw me. Not a frail old victim. His father. And the disappointment burning in my eyes was hot enough to melt steel. Sloane stepped back, genuinely rattled by the sudden surge of force from the man she'd written off as helpless. "Sit down, old man," she hissed, but her voice had lost its footing. "Guards, restrain him." Both men moved forward, reaching for their batons. I turned to meet them, fists balled, ready to make one last stand. But before they could lay a hand on me, Cade rose from his seat. "Wait," Cade said. His voice was trembling, but he was on his feet. "Don't touch him." Sloane turned on her husband, her eyes flashing like something feral. "Sit down, Cade. Let the adults handle this." "No," Cade said louder this time. He looked at the mess of soup on the floor. He looked at the fear carved into his mother's face. And then he looked at the red welt rising on his own cheek. Something moved in him, a tiny ember in a cold pile of ash. "We need to talk, Sloane," Cade said. "Alone." "We are way past talking, honey." Sloane sneered, her hand moving to her purse. She wasn't reaching for a phone. The air in the room went taut, stretched thin, as a wire about to snap. I watched her hand disappear into that leather bag, and I knew that the moment for slaps and speeches had passed. What had begun was survival. Sloane stormed out of the dining room, her heels hammering the floor, like blows from a mallet trailing a silence sharp enough to cut. She needed to change her dress, but I knew she was also going after something far more dangerous than clean clothes. Final paperwork, or a gun. The heavy oak door slammed upstairs, and the sound rang through the empty house. I glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner. It ticked loudly, a steady rhythmic countdown. We had 5 minutes, maybe less. The 2 guards by the door shifted their weight, restless and bored. They were hired muscle, not family. As long as we stayed seated, whatever we said among ourselves wasn't their concern. I turned my whole body toward Cade. He was still staring at the puddle of consommé pooled on the floor, his face buried in both hands. He looked small. He looked like a boy who'd smashed something precious and was braced for the punishment. But I wasn't going to hit him again. Violence builds walls. Truth brings them down. "Cade, look at me," I said, quietly. No need for volume. It was the same voice I used when a foundation was off by an inch and the whole structure was at risk. The voice of total, unshakable authority. Cade kept his head down. "I can't, Dad. I can't." "Look at me, son." I said it again, sharper. He lifted his head slowly. His left cheek was livid where my hand had connected. His eyes were swimming in tears and something worse, terror. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't reach for his hand. I planted my elbows on the expensive tablecloth and leaned forward. "I know about the cryptocurrency, Cade," I said, holding his gaze. "I know about the $2 million you lost. I know about the loan sharks threatening to break your legs. And I know about the $5 million life insurance policy that matures on Monday." Cade's eyes went wide. His mouth opened to deny it, and the words died before they formed. He could see it in my face. I already knew everything. "You think this is a way out?" I went on, my voice cold and flat. "You think killing your own father is just a financial transaction, a line on a spreadsheet, a number you balance against your debts? Is that what I taught you? Is that the man I raised?" Cade shook his head hard. "No, Dad. No, it's not like that. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I cut him off. "You are weak, and you married a shark who smelled it on you." "It's not about the money." Cade's voice cracked open. He slammed his fist on the table, and the silverware jumped. "It's about mercy, Dad. It's about ending the pain." I went still. The room went with me. Even the guards looked over. "Mercy," I repeated, slowly turning the word over. "What pain are you talking about, Cade?" Cade looked bewildered. His eyes moved from me to Loretta and back. "The cancer," he whispered. I felt Loretta go rigid beside me. "What cancer?" she breathed. Cade stared at us, as though we were the ones who had lost our minds. "The pancreatic cancer stage 4. Sloane showed me the medical reports from Dr. Hollis Crane. She said you were in agony, Dad. She said you were hiding it from Mom to protect her. She said the doctors gave you 2 weeks of hell before the end." He was weeping openly now, tears falling onto his tuxedo. "She said this was a kindness," he sobbed. "She said the pills and the wine were just a strong sedative that would stop your heart peacefully. She said you wanted this. She said you asked for this." I sat back. The air left my body. It was a masterstroke of manipulation. Sloane hadn't merely convinced Cade to kill me for money. She had persuaded him that murdering his father was an act of love. She had turned his weakness into her weapon. I looked at Loretta. She was shaking not with grief, with rage. "Cade, look at your father," Loretta said, her voice barely holding together. "Look at him. Does he look like a man who is dying?" Cade blinked through his tears and looked at me. "He had his annual physical just last week," Loretta pressed on. "His blood pressure is 120/80. His heart is strong as an ox. He walked 5 miles yesterday morning. There is no cancer, Cade. There never was." Cade shook his head. "But the papers the biopsy results Sloane showed me, they had the hospital seal." "Sloane has a printer and no conscience," I said. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket, squared my shoulders, and drew myself to my full height. I did not look like a dying man. I looked like a man ready to pull a house apart with his bare hands. "Cade," I said, "your wife is not trying to spare me from suffering. She is securing a payout and setting you up to take the fall." Loretta rose beside me. She reached into her pocket for a tissue, but her hand stopped mid-motion. She looked at Cade with a sudden sharp clarity in her eyes. "It wasn't the first time," she whispered. We both looked at her. "Cade," Loretta said, "do you remember last month when Sloane's first husband died? The accident?" Cade nodded slowly. "He fell asleep at the wheel, drove off the bridge." Loretta leaned across the table, her eyes locked on her son's. 2 weeks before that accident, I was helping Sloane look for her lipstick in her purse. "I found a bottle of pills," Loretta said. "Strong sedatives, the kind they use for horses. I asked her about them and she snatched the bag away, said they were for the dog." She paused. "But Sloane doesn't have a dog, Cade." The color drained out of Cade's face until he looked like a man made of ash. "She drugged him," Loretta said, her voice steady and hard. "Just like she tried to drug your father tonight. That was no accident, Cade. That was a rehearsal. And tonight is the main event." Cade looked like the floor was dissolving beneath him. Everything he believed about his life was coming apart at the seams. The woman he loved wasn't a savior. She was a black widow. "But," he stammered, "she loves me. We're going to have a baby." I laughed. It came out harsh and hollow. "There is no baby, Cade," I said. "Just like there is no cancer. Just like there is no mercy. There is only the money, and once I'm in the ground and she's cashed the check, who do you think comes next on her list?" I pointed at the empty chair where Sloane had been sitting. "I saw the documents in the study," I said. "A trust controlled solely by her. You are not her partner in this, Cade. You are a loose end." Cade stared at that empty chair. His hands were shaking so badly the table hummed with it. Then we heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Deliberate. "She's coming back," Loretta whispered, her fingers closing around my arm. I looked at Cade. He was shattered, but I needed to know whether he was shattered enough to be put back together, or whether he was just rubble. "You have a choice, son," I said, dropping my voice low. "You can sit there and be a victim, or you can stand up and be a Dunbar. But you need to decide right now, because when that door opens, the talking is finished." Cade looked up at me. His eyes were full of fear, but for the first time all night the fog was beginning to lift. "She lied to me," he whispered. "Yes," I said. The door handle turned. Cade wiped his face with his sleeve and pulled in a long, unsteady breath. I cut my eyes to the guards. They were coiling up, ready for orders. I found Loretta's hand and squeezed it. "Whatever happens," I murmured to her, "stay behind me." The door swung open. Sloane walked in. She had changed into a sleek pantsuit and combat boots. No more party clothes. She was dressed for work now. And in her right hand she held a syringe. "Everyone calm down," she said, smiling the kind of smile that never gets anywhere near the eyes. "Dr. Hollis Crane says the pills might take too long. We're going to speed things up." She looked at Cade. "Hold him down, honey." Cade looked at the syringe. He looked at Sloane. Then he looked at me. And in that single beat of silence, the war for my son's soul was fought and won. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. For a heartbeat, I thought I had reached him. I could see the battle raging behind his eyes, the terrified boy, wrestling against the weak man he had become. He looked at the syringe in Sloane's hand, then back at me, and for a moment I saw him begin to rise, not as a subordinate, but as a son standing up for his father. But Sloane saw it too. She was a predator, and predators know the instant they're losing control of the pack. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She simply dropped every mask at once: the devoted wife, the gracious hostess, the grieving daughter-in-law, all of it gone in an instant. What remained was something cold and mechanical and terrifyingly empty. "You are pathetic, Cade," she said. No heat in it, just a flat clinical observation. She didn't even bother looking at him. Her gaze moved past him to the double doors of the dining room. "Plan B," she called out. The doors swung open immediately. The two men who had been posted in the hallway stepped inside. Up close, they were even bigger than I'd registered. They didn't carry themselves like security trained to de-escalate. They moved like street muscle hired to finish things. Their eyes were blank. They weren't here to escort us anywhere. They were here to dispose of us. "Grab them," Sloane ordered, one manicured finger pointing at me and Loretta. "Take them to the wine cellar, tie them up, and make sure the basement door is unlocked." She turned to Dr. Hollis Crane, who stood in the shadows, polishing his glasses. "When the coroner arrives," Sloane continued, glancing at her watch, "we'll say they got confused in the dark, opened the wrong door looking for the bathroom, and went down the stone stairs. At their age, a fall like that is fatal, especially with neck trauma." My blood went cold. It wasn't just a plan. It was a screenplay, and she was blocking out our death scene right in front of us. Loretta sucked in a sharp breath of pure horror and grabbed my arm so tight her nails broke through my jacket. One of the guards, a giant with a scar bisecting his eyebrow, moved toward Loretta. He reached out a hand the size of a shovel and closed it around her arm. "Come on, Grandma," he grunted. "Let's take a little walk." Something in me broke loose, not fear of dying. It was the sight of this thug putting his hands on my wife. I had spent 40 years on construction sites and 3 years in a war zone. I knew violence. I knew exactly how ugly it could get. And I knew that if they got us into that cellar, we were not coming back out. I am 72 years old. My knees ache when rain is coming. My back locks up in the mornings. But in that moment, I felt none of it. What I felt was a bolt of adrenaline so clean and pure, it was like current running through wire. I carry a cane. Most people read it as a sign of weakness, a prop for a fading old man. But I built that cane myself. Solid ironwood, dense and heavy as a length of pipe. And the handle is a solid bronze hawk's head, weighing nearly 2 pounds. It was never just a walking stick. It was a bludgeon. As the guard's hand closed on Loretta, I shifted my weight. I didn't step back. I stepped in. I took the shaft in both hands and swung it like a bat. I didn't go for his head, that's an amateur's move. I targeted the one place no amount of muscle can protect. The bronze hawk's head caught the guard's shin bone with a crack that rang off the high ceiling. The sound was wet and final. He didn't scream right away. He simply froze, eyes blown wide in disbelief. Then the leg gave out. He went down sideways, howling and clutching his destroyed shin. "Run, Loretta!" I bellowed, driving her toward the door. The second guard came at me faster than the first. He threw a heavy punch that caught my shoulder and detonated pain all the way down my arm, spinning me into the china cabinet. Plates and crystal exploded off the shelves and hit the floor in a cascade of wreckage. "Get him, you idiots!" Sloane shrieked. Whatever composure she had left was gone now. "Don't let them get out!" I swung the cane hard behind me without looking, clearing space. I felt it find ribs. The second guard grunted and gave me a half step. That half step was enough. "Go, go, go!" I grabbed Loretta's hand, and we scrambled through the broken glass. My shoulder was burning, like something was wrong inside it, but I pushed the thought away. We burst out of the dining room and into the hallway. Cade was still standing at the table, paralyzed, watching the chaos erupt in his elegant home. He didn't move to help us. He didn't move to stop us. A statue of cowardice. We ran. My lungs were on fire. My legs felt like wet concrete. Behind us came the hammer of the second guard's boots and Sloane's screaming coordinates. "Where are we going?" Loretta cried, her breath ragged and desperate. "The front door is locked, Ez." "Not the front door," I gasped. "The study." The study was 20 feet away, the only room on this floor, with a solid oak door and a heavy-duty deadbolt. I had put that lock in myself years ago, insisting on real security for Cade's private business. I never imagined I'd be using it to save my own life. We threw ourselves at the door. I seized the handle and drove it open, and we half fell inside, skidding on the polished wood floor. I clawed my way upright and threw the heavy door shut just as the guard's body slammed into it from the other side. The walls shook. The door shuddered, but it held. I threw the deadbolt. Click. I hit the secondary lock. Click. A moment later, another thunderous blow hit the door, then a kick. "Open this door!" Sloane screamed from the hallway. "Open it now, Ez, or I swear to God I will burn this house down around you." I backed away from the door chest, heaving, fighting to pull air in. What comes next is the moment that broke something open, not just in the room, but inside my son. The truth he was about to face had been hiding behind a face he loved and trusted completely. Before we get there, let me ask you something. If someone close to you was slowly working against everything you stood for, would you confront them head on, or would you wait and build your case in the shadows? Loretta sank into the leather armchair, weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. We were trapped, cornered, but we were breathing. I scanned the study. The Project Omega folder was still on the desk, where I'd left it the paper record of everything they had done to us. Another kick rattled the doorframe. The wood groaned, but the hinges held. Good American oak solid steel bolts. It would buy us time. Not much, but some. I made my way to the desk, leaning hard on my cane. The adrenaline was draining away, and the pain was flooding back in its place. I looked at my wife. She looked small and hollowed out. And it hit me then, this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a war, and we were losing it. I needed a weapon. I needed help. And with barred windows and severed phone lines, we were completely cut off. Or so I believed. Then my eyes found the old decorative fireplace in the corner. Mounted above it on the wall were two antique flintlock pistols, replicas, ornamental, useless. But below them in the display case was something else. A flare gun, a leftover from my boating days that Cade had held onto as a keepsake. I grabbed it. Broke the barrel open. Empty. My stomach dropped. Then I spotted a box of shells on the bookshelf beside it, dusty, forgotten, overlooked. I snatched the box. My hands trembled as I pulled out a red shell. Sloane was screaming outside the door, threatening to bring more men. I loaded the flare gun. I looked at Loretta. "They want a tragedy," I whispered, closing my grip around the orange handle. "They want an accident." I moved to the window. "Let's give them a fireworks show instead." The oak door shuddered under another massive blow. Boom! Dust sifted down from the door frame and settled on the polished floor. It was a solid door, American white oak 2 inches thick, put in by my own crew 10 years ago. But even the best wood eventually gives way to brute force. Behind that door, Sloane was barking orders, and her hired muscle was taking turns throwing their shoulders into the timber. They were trying to break the lock. They were also trying to break us. "What do we do?" Loretta whispered. She was pressed into the corner by the heavy velvet drapes, clutching a brass letter opener in both hands like a dagger. Her eyes were locked on the hinges, which were starting to buckle with each blow. I didn't look at the door. I looked at the room. This was the sanctuary I had built for my son, though Cade had never really used it. He preferred his gaming setup and his screens. This space with its leather-bound books and the scent of cedar was just set dressing, a prop for the successful businessman he played at being. My gaze dropped to the wet bar in the corner, specifically to the wood paneling beneath the granite counter. 5 years ago, after the house was finished, I had put in a wall safe there, a hidden compartment for emergency cash or documents. I gave Cade the combination, told him to change it immediately. Knowing my son, he never touched it. I lowered myself to my knees in front of the panel, my shoulders screaming the whole way down. I was 72, not 22, and every bruised muscle was filing a complaint. I ran my fingers along the molding until I felt the hidden catch. Pressed it. A section of the wood popped open, revealing a digital keypad. "Please don't have changed it," I muttered. "Please be exactly as lazy as I think you are." I entered the code. 0612, my birthday. The keypad beeped. A green light blinked in the dark recess. I let out a breath I'd been holding without knowing it. I pulled the handle, and the heavy steel door swung clear. It wasn't empty. Resting on the metal shelf inside was a snub-nosed .38 Special revolver. Old. The bluing worn off the barrel. A gun I'd given Cade years ago for home protection. It sat there cold and ready. Beside it was a thick manila envelope. I reached for the gun first and checked the cylinder. Fully loaded. 6 rounds of hollow point. "Ez, use it," Loretta hissed from the corner. "Shoot through the door. Drive them back." I held the gun. It felt familiar in my hand. Heavy in the right way. But I shook my head. "I'm not a killer, Loretta," I said. "And if I fire through that door, I might hit Cade. He's out there too. I am not going to kill my son to save myself." I set the gun on the carpet and picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed. I drew out the papers inside, expecting cash or old tax filings. What I found made the air leave my lungs like a blow to the chest. It was a legal petition. A petition for dissolution of marriage, divorce papers. I read through them fast. The petitioner was Sloane Vreeland. The respondent was Cade Dunbar. The signature line was dated next Tuesday. My hands shook. She had this mapped out to the hour. Kill me on Saturday. Cremate me on Sunday. Cash the insurance check on Monday. Serve Cade with divorce papers on Tuesday. She wasn't just using him. She was disposing of him. Once the money was secured, she planned to kick him to the curb. She had already listed the grounds for divorce: adultery, gambling, addiction, financial instability. She was going to walk away with the house, the fortune, and her reputation intact, and leave my son holding nothing but guilt and a potential prison sentence if the whole thing ever unraveled. "This woman is the devil," I whispered. I looked up at Loretta. She had come closer and was reading over my shoulder. She gasped. She never loved him. Loretta said, tears cutting down her face. She hates him. The door gave a sharp crack behind us. The top hinge had torn partway free of the frame. Splinters of wood were flying. 2 minutes, maybe less before they were through. "We need a way out," Loretta said, gripping my arm. "The window, Ez. Break the window." I looked at it, floor to ceiling overlooking the cliffs a showpiece. But it was reinforced hurricane-grade glass, and it was secured by Sloane's new security system. Heavy steel shutters had rolled down halfway, locking into the frame with magnetic bolts. I tried the manual release on the wall. Dead. The power cut had killed it. "We can't break it," I said, "and we can't lift it. Those magnetic locks hold 5,000 pounds of pressure." "Then use the gun," Loretta pleaded. "Shoot the lock." I looked at the revolver again. A .38 special against a hardened steel magnetic lock would just send a bullet ricocheting back at us. It wouldn't break the circuit. But staring at those rounds in the cylinder, something clicked. A demolition course. The Army. 50 years ago. "I don't need the bullet," I said, my mind moving fast. "I need the powder." I took the gun and shook the rounds out onto the carpet. I grabbed my pocket knife. "Ez, what are you doing?" Loretta cried. "They're almost through." "Hold this," I said, putting the desk flashlight in her hands. "Shine it on the lock mechanism." I got down and crawled to the window. The magnetic lock was a small housing unit set at the base of the frame. If I could destroy the internal workings, the failsafe would release the shutters automatically. I took one of the rounds, jammed the knife blade into the seam between the lead slug and the brass casing, and twisted. Hard work. My fingers ached, but the lead gave way. I popped the bullet head free. Inside was the gray granular powder. I poured it carefully into the keyhole of the locking mechanism. Then a second round, then a third. I packed that lock with as much powder as it would hold. "Ez, the door!" Loretta screamed. I looked back. A hand had reached through the gap in the broken frame and was groping for the deadbolt, the guard with the scar. I tore a strip of heavy fabric from the curtain, tie-back, twisted it tight, and drove it into the powder-packed hole, leaving a short tail hanging out. A crude fuse. "Get behind the desk," I shouted to Loretta. "Cover your ears and open your mouth, it equalizes the pressure." I dug a book of matches from my pocket, struck one. The flame jumped up, throwing light across my wife's face and the terror written on it. I touched the flame to the fabric tail. It caught. I threw myself behind the heavy mahogany desk just as the fuse burned down into the lock. There was a sharp, deafening crack, not a gunshot, more like a thunderclap sealed inside a bottle. Smoke poured from the window frame. For a second, nothing happened. Then came the sound of metal grinding against metal. The explosion had shattered the locking pin. The failsafe disengaged. The heavy steel shutters rolled upward with a groan, exposing the storm-hammered night beyond. I rose from behind the desk, coughing through the smoke. The window was open. Rain lashed in sideways. Behind us, the door finally surrendered with a splintering crash. The guards poured into the room, ready to finish it. But they were too late. I seized Loretta's hand. "Out!" I yelled. "Into the storm!" We threw ourselves over the sill and dropped onto the cold, wet grass of the backyard, just as a gunshot cracked from inside the study and blew the glass apart above our heads. We were clear of the fortress, but now we were in the open and the hunt had begun. I need to take you back a moment back to before the shutters opened. The study door had been screaming. That is the only word for it. Under the relentless hammering of those two hired thugs, the solid American oak was splintering and groaning like something alive and in agony. Every blow sent a tremor through the floorboards I could feel in my feet. I was crouched behind the heavy mahogany desk, Loretta sheltered behind my body, watching the makeshift fuse burn its way toward the gunpowder-packed lock. The flame was small and blue, hissing as it consumed the twisted fabric strip. It was the only light in the room besides the occasional flare of lightning from the storm outside. "Ez, they're coming," Loretta whispered, her voice nearly swallowed by the pounding on the door. She was trembling so hard, the desk rattled against my spine. I kept my eyes on the fuse. 3 inches, 2, then the pounding stopped. For a moment, the silence was more unnerving than the noise had been. Then I heard a voice. My son. "Sloan, stop it!" Cade screamed from out in the hallway. His voice was raw, breaking apart. "You can't do this. They are my parents." I froze. I signaled Loretta to stay down and pressed my ear against the wood. "Get out of the way, Cade," Sloan hissed. Her voice was unrecognizable, stripped of every pretense. Not the woman who had married my son. Something cornered and dangerous. "No," Cade shouted. I heard the sounds of a scuffle. Someone slammed against the wall. "You lied to me, Sloan. Fake medical records. You told me he was dying. You told me this was mercy." His voice cracked. "This isn't mercy. This is murder." I closed my eyes. My boy. He had finally come awake. It took a gun and a locked door, but he had found his spine at last. "Move, Cade." Sloan's warning was low and deliberate, barely above a murmur. "I have come too far to let your conscience destroy everything. We are $3 million in debt. Do you want to lose this house? Do you want to go to prison?" "I don't care about the house," Cade yelled. "I'm calling the police. I'm ending this right now." I heard movement, Cade lunging for something, her phone maybe, or the door handle. Then the sound that changes everything. Bang. One shot deafening in the enclosed hallway. Final sounding. I stopped breathing. Loretta let out a strangled cry, both hands flying to her mouth. Outside the door, a heavy thud, a body hitting the floor. "Cade!" Sloan screamed, but there was no grief in it, only frustration, cold and sharp. "Look what you made me do." Then a low moan filtered through the wood. He was alive. Thank God Almighty he was alive. "My shoulder!" Cade's voice came through wet with pain. "You shot me. You actually shot me." "Get him out of here!" Sloan barked at the guards. "Drag him to the kitchen. Tie him up. If he bleeds out, that's his problem. I'll deal with the old man myself." A cold fury washed over me then. Not hot rage, cold, clear, and absolutely steady. This was no longer a family conspiracy. It was a war zone. Sloan had crossed from manipulator to killer. She had put a bullet in her own husband to get to us. I looked at the fuse, burned to the nub. "Cover your ears!" I yelled to Loretta, throwing myself over her. The gunpowder in the lock ignited. Crack. It wasn't a massive blast, more a sharp concussive snap, like a hammer driving a spike into an anvil. Smoke billowed from the window frame, reeking of sulfur and scorched metal. I scrambled up, coughing. The magnetic mechanism was ruined, still smoking. The safety latches gave way with a metallic groan, and the heavy shutters began their slow rise, unveiling the night. The wind hit us like a wall, a nor'easter, a violent storm driving in off the Atlantic. Rain came in horizontally, drenching the expensive rugs and stinging my face like pellets. The door shook again. A massive kick split the wood straight down the center. Through the gap, I could see the face of the scarred guard. He was grinning. "On there in here," he bellowed. I grabbed Loretta. "The window now." "The drop," she cried, staring at the dark, rain-slicked ledge. "It's 20 feet down." "We're not jumping," I said, hauling her toward the opening. "We're climbing, the trellis." I got her over the sill. The wind nearly hurled her back inside. Her dress was soaked through in seconds, plastered to her frame. She was 70 years old, a retired nurse not built for this. But terror is a powerful motivator. She grabbed the thick iron ivy trellis, bolted to the side of the house. "Go," I urged, one hand steadying her. "Don't look down, just find the footholds." She started down, swallowed almost immediately by the driving rain. I swung my leg over the sill just as the study door exploded inward. The guard burst through, gun raised. "Hey!" he shouted, leveling the weapon. I didn't think. I grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the desk and hurled it at him with everything I had left. Not a great throw, but enough to make him flinch. I dropped out the window into the storm. The ledge was barely 6 inches wide, stone gone slick as ice. The wind clawed at my jacket, trying to peel me off the wall. Below me, nothing, just darkness and the sound of waves battering the cliffs. I got my hands on the trellis. The iron was cold and slippery. My knuckles screamed with arthritis. My shoulder, the one the guard had punched, was a throbbing coal of pain. I looked up. The guard was leaning out the window, trying to aim through the storm. A massive gust of wind and rain hit him full in the face. That bought me a second. I slid down the trellis fast, scraping my knuckles raw on the stone face of the house. Below, Loretta had reached the ground. She was looking up, her face white in a flash of lightning. I let go and dropped the last 5 feet, landing hard in the mud. My bad knee buckled and I went down, biting through the pain, refusing to make a sound. Loretta was at my side, instantly pulling at me. "Ezra, you hit!" I spat blood into the mud. "No, just old." Shouts erupted above us. Flashlight beams sliced through the rain, raking the yard. "They're outside!" Sloane's voice cut through the wind like a blade. "Release the dogs." My blood went cold. Nero and Caesar, 2 purebred Rottweilers, trained attack dogs, Sloane kept in kennels behind the garage. "We can't outrun dogs," Loretta sobbed, clutching my arm. "We don't have to outrun them," I said, forcing myself upright and wiping the mud out of my eyes. "We just have to make it to the trees." I pointed toward the dark tree line 50 yards out, the dense forest that ringed the property. "Move, Loretta. Move like your life depends on it. Because it does." We ran, 2 old people sliding and stumbling in the mud, gripping each other's hands while thunder split the sky, and the baying of the dogs erupted somewhere close behind us. We weren't prey anymore. We were survivors, driving ourselves into the dark to fight back. The forest was not a sanctuary. It was a mouth waiting to swallow us whole. The storm had turned the ground into a freezing slurry of mud and decomposing leaves that sucked at our shoes with every stride. I held Loretta's hand so tight, I feared I might snap her fingers, but I could not let go. If we lost each other in this darkness, that was the end. The rain came down in solid sheets, erasing the world, cutting our visibility to just a few feet ahead. The cold was bone deep, the kind that gets through soaked formal wear and takes up residence in your chest. We had barely made it 50 yards into the tree line when the sound rose behind us. Not thunder, something worse. The guttural, rhythmic baying of dogs that had already found a scent. Sloane had done it. She had released Nero and Caesar, 2 purebred Rottweilers she claimed were strictly for personal protection. I had watched those animals shred a delivery truck tire like it was paper, just for sport. Now they were on our trail. "Move, Loretta," I whispered, hauling her forward. "Keep going." "As I can't," she gasped. Her chest was heaving. Her dress was waterlogged with mud, dragging her down like a dead weight. My legs. I didn't answer, didn't have the breath to spare. My mind was already hurtling back 50 years. Back to a different jungle, a different war. The foliage was different, but the feeling was bone-deep identical. That crawling heat of being hunted. The instinct to go rigid. The certainty that movement was the only thing keeping you breathing. I stopped watching my feet and started reading the terrain. We were on a slope. Water runs downhill. "To the creek," I said. "We have to reach the water." Why, Loretta cried as a branch lashed across her cheek, raising a red welt. "The dogs," I said, shouldering through a thorn thicket that clawed at my tuxedo jacket. "They hunt by scent. The rain is helping us, but the water will finish the job." Cross the creek and we break the trail entirely. We lurched down the embankment. Behind us, through the tree line, flashlight beams were slicing the rain into white ribbons. The guards were moving. They were sweeping in formation, fanning wide. These men knew their business. They weren't simple hired muscle. They were professionals. And the barking was closing in louder with every second. "Ez, watch out!" Loretta screamed. I spun around, but it wasn't a dog. It was the ground. Her foot had snagged on a buried root. She went down hard. There was a sickening snap and a cry of pain that the wind swallowed almost instantly. Loretta. I dropped to my knees beside her in the mud. She was clutching her right ankle. Her face had gone ghost pale in the dark. Eyes squeezed shut, jaw clenched against the agony. "It's broken," she sobbed. I felt it go. "Ez, I can't walk. You have to leave me." I looked at the flashlights, maybe 100 yards back, bouncing through the trees. Don't you dare say that I growled. I grabbed her arm. "I am not leaving you. I didn't leave you when we had nothing. I didn't leave you when we lost the first baby. And I am sure as hell not leaving you for 2 dogs and a witch in a pantsuit." I pulled her upright. She cried out, but she bit her lip bloody to swallow the sound. "Lean on me," I said, locking my arm around her waist. I took her full weight. My bad knee lit up like a furnace, firing bolts of pain up into my hip. But pain is just information. And right now the information was simple: we were still alive. We hobbled on. The creek was just ahead, swollen with rain and crashing over jagged rocks. "Into the water," I ordered. It hit us like a wall of ice. That cold was a full-body shock that sucked the breath clean out of our chests. The current churned around our waists, grabbing at us, working to drag our feet out from under us. We pushed downstream using the current instead of fighting it. It was slow, punishing work. Every footfall was a gamble on slick rock. Up on the bank above us, the dogs reached the spot where we had waded in. I heard the barking dissolve into confused, frustrated yelping. They had lost us. "Keep going," I whispered. "Just a little further." A shape materialized in the darkness ahead. A structure. Not the main house. The old gardener's shed. A ramshackle wooden shack that Kate had been swearing he'd tear down for years. Ivy had eaten half of it, and the roof sagged badly, but it had 4 walls and something overhead. We hauled ourselves out of the creek and up the slick bank. I put my shoulder into the rotting door. It gave way on a single rusted hinge. We crumpled onto the dirt floor inside. The place reeked of mold, gasoline, and dead leaves, but it was dry, or at least drier than the woods. I shoved the door back into its frame and jammed a rusted shovel blade against the base. It wouldn't hold a determined man, but it would hold a dog. "Ez," Loretta whispered. Her voice was barely there. She was shaking in violent waves. Hypothermia was already working on her. I crawled to her side in the blackness. I dug into my pocket for my lighter. It was soaked through. I thumbed the wheel once, twice, nothing. Third try, a small flame coughed to life. I held it up and looked at Loretta. She was a wreck, silver hair caked with mud dress and tatters, lips going blue. I looked at her ankle. It had ballooned to the size of a grapefruit straining against the shoe leather. "We have to get that shoe off," I said. "If the swelling keeps up, I'll have to cut it off." I set the lighter on a dusty workbench, letting it throw long, wavering shadows across the walls. I stripped off my tuxedo jacket. It was beyond saving anyway. I gripped the sleeve of my white dress shirt, the one I had put on to look like a man worthy of his son's occasion. I tore the sleeve off at the shoulder. The sound of ripping fabric was jarring in that small space. I stripped the other sleeve, then the back panel. I kneeled at Loretta's feet. "This is going to hurt," I told her, meeting her eyes. "Do it," she said through chattering teeth. I unbuckled the shoe and worked it off her foot. She gasped, tears sliding silently down her face. I wound the makeshift bandages around the ankle, pulling them firm to lock the joint still. Her fingers dug into my shoulder nails, breaking the skin. She never screamed. She was the toughest woman I had ever had the privilege of knowing. "There," I said, cinching the final knot. "Best I can do." I settled back against the wall and drew her into me, sharing what little body heat we had left between us. We sat there in the dark, listening to the storm hammer the tin roof, listening to the dogs barking drift further and further into the west woods. They had taken the wrong heading, as Loretta whispered, pressing her face against my chest. Why did he do it? I loved him so much. I gave him everything I had. I ran my hand over her wet hair. My heart sat in my chest like a cold stone, dense and heavy. "Because he is weak, Loretta," I said, my voice low, "and because we let him stay weak. We shielded him from the world, and he never had to learn how to stand in it on his own. So, when a predator like Sloane came along, he didn't push back. He just folded." I felt Loretta go rigid. She pulled away and looked at me. In the faint guttering light of the dying flame, I watched something shift behind her eyes. The fear drained out. What replaced it was older, harder. "He is not our son anymore," she said. Her voice didn't waver. "Not tonight. Tonight he is nothing but an accomplice." I gave a slow nod. The grief was still sitting there, but the soldier in me was pushing forward and taking the wheel. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a commander whose perimeter had been overrun. "We are going to get through this, Loretta," I said. "We are going to stay put until first light, or until help comes through that door." And then, Loretta asked. I let my eyes move across the rusted tools hanging on the wall, a scythe, a hammer. Old and long neglected, same as us, but in the right hand still deadly. And then I said, letting my voice drop to a low, flat growl, "I am going to give Sloane a lesson in where she sits on the food chain. She thinks we are prey because we have years on us. She thinks we are soft because we have been decent. I lifted a heavy iron wrench from the floor. It sat in my grip with a familiar solid weight. She is about to learn that the oldest wolves are the ones who know how to hunt when there is no light. Loretta nodded once. She reached over and took my hand. Her grip was iron. "Rest now, Ez," she said. "We've got a war to fight, come morning." I killed the lighter, and we dropped back into darkness. But it wasn't the same darkness that had been chasing us through the forest. This was tactical darkness, the darkness of a set ambush. We weren't running anymore. We were waiting, and God help whoever touched the door. The shed smelled like a tomb. Gasoline and wet rot, and the sharp metallic bite of old rust all layered together. I felt my way through the black hands dragging across cobwebs and catching on sharp edges. Loretta was huddled in the corner, wrapped in a mildewed canvas tarp I'd peeled off a lawnmower. Her teeth were chattering so hard, I was afraid the guards would pick it up over the sound of the storm. I needed warmth. I needed light. But more than either, I needed a line to the outside world. My hand knocked against something cold and solid under the workbench. A generator. I traced my fingers along the casing. It was a Briggs & Stratton unit from the 90s, tough, dependable, the kind we ran in field hospitals. Beside it sat a dusty gray box fitted with dials, a shortwave radio. Cade had gone through a survivalist phase years back, bought all the gear, tinkered with it for a week, then abandoned everything in this shed to collect dust. For once in his life, my son's inability to finish what he started might be the thing that kept us breathing. I dragged the radio onto the workbench. I hit the power switch. Nothing. The battery pack was dead, corroded down to nothing by years of humidity. I looked at the generator. It had a 12-volt starter battery. I pulled out my pocket knife. The blade was dull and gummed with tree sap, but it was what I had. I cut the power cord off an old lamp. I stripped both ends back, bearing the copper. "Ez, what are you doing?" Loretta whispered, her voice unsteady. "Building us a lifeline," I said. Then I froze. Voices, right outside, just on the other side of those thin, rotting walls. I dropped low, pulling Loretta back into the shadows with me. Through the cracks in the planking, I watched flashlight beams rake through the rain. "I don't see any tracks," one guard muttered. "The rain washed everything away." "They're old," the second one said. "They can't have gotten far. Besides, where are they going to run?" "Out to the road," the first guard said. "Maybe flag down a car, call the cops." The second guard laughed. It was a hollow, ugly sound. "Let them call. Sloan paid Sheriff Hensley $50,000 cash this morning. He has standing orders to disregard any distress calls from this property tonight. Official position is, it's a family dispute, confused old man, nothing more. If deputies show up, they'll be working for us, not them." Something cold and hollow opened up inside me. The sheriff. The law itself. Sloan had bought every last piece of it. There was no cavalry riding to our rescue. We were on our own. The footsteps moved off toward the creek. I stared at the radio. If the police were closed off to us, I needed a different channel entirely, someone who operated outside money and jurisdiction. I went back to work. My hands were shaking, not fear, just the cold working into my joints. I twisted the stripped copper around the generator battery's terminals and connected the leads to the radio's power input. I pulled in a slow breath and hit the switch again. Static. It was the finest sound I had ever heard in my life, a rush of white noise flooding that small, dark space. I lifted the microphone. It felt solid in my grip. I didn't tune to the emergency frequency. The sheriff would have ears on that. I spun the dial to a number that doesn't appear in any civilian handbook. 14.2 megahertz, a frequency used by private contractors, men who used to be soldiers. Men like Obadiah. Obadiah was a man I had dragged out of a burning Humvee in Kuwait 30 years ago. He ran a private security firm in North Carolina now. He owed me a life debt, and tonight I was collecting. I pressed the transmit button. Breaker 19. I said, voice flat and quiet. "This is Iron Horse broadcasting on secure channel. Static, then silence." I counted. 5 seconds. 10. "Iron Horse, this is Ghost Dog." A voice broke through the speaker, deep gravel, unhurried. "You are on a restricted frequency. Identify." I didn't waste breath on pleasantries. "Get me the prophet," I said. "Tell him Iron Horse is down. Tell him the perimeter is breached." A pause. Then a different voice cut through the static cleaner, sharper. Is that you, Obadiah?" "Obadiah," I said. "I'm at my son's estate in the Outer Banks. My life is in danger. Hostiles on sight, armed, and they've bought the local law." Jesus Obadiah breathed. "What do you need?" I looked at Loretta. She was watching me, eyes wide, caught somewhere between terror and hope. I steadied my breath. I gave him the code we had agreed on long ago over whiskey and a hand of poker. A last resort code. One we prayed we'd never use. "Broken Falcon," I said. "Coordinates 40, North 72, West." I paused, squeezing the microphone until my knuckles went white. "Bring Hunters Obadiah, not Extraction. Hunters." The line went silent for a beat. Then Obadiah's voice returned, cold as steel, steady as bedrock. "Broken Falcon confirmed. We are 20 minutes out. Keep your head down, Ez. We are bringing the rain." I clicked the radio off and disconnected the wires. I crawled back to Loretta and got my arms around her. "Who was that?" she asked, shivering against me. "That was the only justice still operating in this world," I told her. "We just have to last 20 minutes. After that, the hunters become the hunted." The rain hammered the tin roof like it was trying to beat its way inside. The darkness in that shed was dense and complete, heavy with the smell of ozone and wet earth. I worked on my knees, hands moving entirely by feel. Sloane thought we were curled in a corner, somewhere begging whatever came next to be quick. She thought we were two frightened old people waiting to be collected. She was wrong. We weren't waiting. We were working. I could hear her voice drifting from the tree line on the wind. She sounded irritated, not afraid. Barking orders at her men, check the perimeter, sweep the creek. She called us geriatric baggage, said we'd probably gone down from hypothermia half a mile back. That arrogance was her fatal flaw. She looked at my gray hair and decided the mind behind it had gone soft. She forgot that before I ever wore a suit in a boardroom, I wore boots in a combat zone. And a combat engineer understands one thing at his core: with the right materials and enough leverage, you can bring down anything. Even a monster. "Ezzy, they're getting closer," Loretta whispered. She was holding the strip generator, Lead's hands shaking but grip solid. Her ankle was pulsing with every beat of her heart, but she held position without a word of complaint. She was holding the line. "Good," I said, winding the copper wire around a rusted iron rake I'd pulled from the corner. "Let them come." I had converted the shed into a kill box. Crude, improvised from desperation and junk, but lethal. I had pulled the live feed off the generator, the one I'd just coaxed back to life, and stripped the insulation from the lead. I ran the positive wire to the metal handle of the rake, which I pushed tines up into the mud just inside the doorway. I ran the negative to a puddle that had seeped under the doorframe. A simple closed circuit, a trap built to deliver a 12-volt jolt at high amperage. It wouldn't necessarily kill a man outright, but it would put him on the floor like a dropped sack of cement. I scanned the room for more. My eyes were adjusting to the dark, pulling shapes out of the gloom. A loose floorboard with a nail angled upward. A fat bag of potting soil sitting high on a shelf. I moved with intention, ignoring the howl in my knees. I pried the floorboard up and balanced it on a flat stone so it would kick upward under weight. I tied a length of fishing line to the potting soil bag and strung it low across the entry at ankle height. It wasn't clean work. It wasn't going to earn any commendations. It was ugly, brutal, and exactly right. Flashlight beams pierced the gaps in the rotting walls. They were right on top of us. I smell something. One guard grunted. His voice was close enough to touch. Too close. Old man probably lit a fire to keep warm. The second one laughed. "Kick the door in. Let's finish this. Sloane wants them back at the house before the coroner gets here." I looked at Loretta. I pressed a finger to my lips. I pointed to the back corner behind the workbench. She nodded and hauled herself into the shadows, both hands wrapped around the heavy pipe wrench I'd given her. I crouched behind the generator, one hand riding the throttle. "Ready," I breathed to myself. The door blew inward. A heavy boot took the rotting wood apart at the lock I'd rigged. The first guard came through. Big man rain slicker shining under his own flashlight. Baton in one hand, taser in the other. Come out," he called, taunting into the dark as he stepped forward. He didn't see the fishing line. His boot clipped the tripwire. He lurched forward, arms thrown wide. "Now!" I shoved the throttle open on the generator. The engine bellowed, belching smoke and raw power. The guard's instincts kicked in, and he reached out to catch himself. His palm came down on the metal rake handle buried in the mud. The circuit closed. The result was immediate. The generator surged. The man's body locked up like he'd turned to stone. He didn't make a sound. His jaw snapped shut hard enough that I heard his teeth crack. He convulsed in violent waves, the current seizing every muscle, short-circuiting his nervous system. He shook for 3 full seconds that stretched out like an hour. Then he folded face first into the mud, a thin curl of smoke rising from his glove. The second guard positioned just outside the doorway stopped dead. He watched his partner go down, saw the sparks jump. He hesitated. That hesitation was all it took. I came out from behind the generator, no weapon in my hands. I was the weapon. I drove my shoulder into the door frame and knocked a heavy rusted scythe off the wall. It clattered down across the doorway. The second guard swung his light on me. What he saw was a 72-year-old man, caked in mud eyes, burning with something cold and absolute. He went for his gun, but he was standing in the puddle. The puddle was wired to the negative lead. I kicked the live wire into the water. The guard let out a short, sharp bark of shock as the current bit through his wet boots. He discharged a wild shot into the air and pitched back, feet going out from under him, landing hard in the mud. He clawed his way backward on all fours, terrified of the electrified shack. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. I had everything I came for. I crossed to the first guard who was groaning face down in the dirt, alive, but done for the night. I reached down and unclipped the radio from his belt. High-end tactical unit, heavy built to last. I checked the channel, set to the main frequency, Sloane's frequency. I raised the radio. My hand didn't shake once. The adrenaline had burned the fear clean away, leaving something clear and cold behind. I pressed transmit. Sloane, I said. My voice was rough smoke and rain and 72 years of hard living. A beat of silence. Then Sloane's voice came back clipped and sharp. Report. Did you find them? Is it done? I looked at Loretta. She was still back in the shadows, pipe wrench in both hands. She looked fierce. She looked like something ancient and untouchable. I brought the radio closer. Your man is down, Sloane. He stepped on a rake. It was a shocking experience. Silence, then a ragged exhale. Ez. Yeah, it's Ez, I said. But not the one you think you know. Not the polite old man who writes checks and keeps his head down. That man died out in those woods tonight. I moved to the doorway and looked out at the rain-hammered forest. The storm was tearing the world apart, but inside me, everything was still. You made a mistake, Sloane, I said. You thought you were after sheep. You thought old meant helpless. You forgot who built this house. You forgot who poured the roads you drive on. You forgot I was fighting wars before your mother drew her first breath. Ez, listen to me. Her voice had a tremor in it now, trying to claw back control. We can work something out. Just come in. We can sit down and talk about the money. I laughed. It was not a warm sound. There is no deal, Sloane, and there is no money. I am done running. I am finished hiding in the mud. I glanced at the radio's battery indicator. Full. I am on my way back to the house, I said. But I am not coming to negotiate. I am coming to take back what belongs to me. I let go of the button. I clipped the radio to my belt. I went through the downed guard's pockets. A spare magazine, a knife. I took both. I stood and offered my hand to Loretta. Can you walk? I asked. She took it, hauling herself upright with the wrench as a cane. She winced hard, but her eyes stayed dry. I can walk, she said. Long as we're walking toward her. I nodded. I shut the generator down. The silence poured back in, with nothing but the rain to fill it. Let's go, I said. We walked out of that shed, not fleeing into the dark anymore, stepping into it with intention. The prey had become the predator, and the night still had a long way to go for the woman in the crimson velvet dress. The radio on my belt was quiet, but the clock running in my head was deafening. Obadiah and his team were 20 minutes out. In private security, 20 minutes is a lifetime. For a man bleeding from a gunshot, it is an eternity. I looked at Loretta. She was huddled in the corner of the shed, shaking hard face, gone white as bone. Her fingers around mine felt like ice. Don't go back, Ezzy, she whispered, voice splintering. They'll kill you. Wait for Obadiah. Wait for the cavalry. I looked down at my wife. I used my thumb to wipe a smear of mud from her cheek. Every part of me wanted to stay, to sit beside her until this nightmare burned itself out. But I couldn't. I can't wait, Loretta, I said quietly. Kate is bleeding. He is a fool and a coward, and he broke something in me tonight that I don't know will ever mend. But he is still the boy I taught to bait a hook. He is still the boy I carried on my shoulders. A father's debt doesn't clear when his son goes wrong. It clears when his son is safe. I pressed my lips to her forehead. A goodbye, though, I didn't say the word. Keep the wrench close, I told her. Anyone comes through that door, and it isn't me you swing like your life depends on it, because it does. I went back out into the storm. The rain had crossed from heavy to vicious. Wind tore through the tree line, ripping branches free and sending them spinning like thrown spears. I didn't go near the front gate. I didn't go near the kitchen entrance where the guards were posted. I went for the old stone retaining wall along the garden's lower edge. Sloane thought she knew this property. She thought ownership meant understanding it her name on the deed, her taste in the curtains. But she didn't know the bones of it. She didn't know what was buried beneath the foundation. When I built this estate 5 years ago, I added something that never appeared on the county blueprints. I called it a drainage access tunnel. What it really was, a prohibition-style escape route, a product of either paranoia or foresight, maybe both. It ran from the retaining wall directly into the back of the wine cellar. I found the loose stone beneath a curtain of ivy. I worked it free with the guard's knife. A black narrow hole stared back at me, breathing damp earth and old spiders. I pressed in, dragging my bad leg after me. The tunnel was barely 3 feet across. I was moving through the throat of the ground itself. I went fast, shutting out the pain in my knees, shutting out the rocks, opening my palms. I was 72 years old, crawling through mud to save a son who had tried to have me killed. The irony sat on my tongue like a penny. I reached the far end of the tunnel. A heavy steel panel blocked the way forward. I found the release latch greased by my own hand 5 years ago. I said a quiet prayer. It hadn't seized. I shoved. It groaned. I threw everything I had left into it, rage and grief, and something that might have been love. The panel swung inward. I spilled out onto the cold stone floor of the wine cellar. The air was cool, smelling of cork and aged oak and money. Bottle racks surrounded me, holding vintages worth more than my first house. I settled into a crouch behind a wall of Bordeaux crates and listened. A sound reached me, low, wet sobbing that turned my stomach over. Please, Sloane, please just call an ambulance. I'm so cold. It was Cade. I eased my head around the crates. What I saw looked like something out of a nightmare. Cade was bound to a heavy wooden tasting chair in the middle of the room. The left side of his tuxedo shirt was soaked dark with blood. His face had gone the color of ash. He was slumped forward, head drooping, each breath shallow and labored. Sloane was there. She wasn't looking at him. She was pacing at tight circuit heels, striking the stone floor in a sharp metronomic rhythm. A laptop in one hand, a whiskey bottle in the other. She pulled a long pull straight from the bottle. "Shut up, Cade," she snapped. "I need to think." She drove the laptop down onto the tasting table directly in front of him. The trust fund. She screamed, putting her face inches from his. The Cayman account. "Give me the access code." "I don't know it," Cade wheezed. "My dad never told me. Said I wasn't ready." Liar, Sloane shrieked. She seized his wounded shoulder and drove her thumb into the bullet hole. Cade screamed a raw, piercing sound that bounced off the vaulted ceiling and went through me like a blade. I went rigid in the shadows, knuckles white around the knife handle. Every cell in my body screamed at me to move, to end it. But she had a gun at her waistband, and there was a guard posted at the foot of the stairs, his back to me. I had to be exact. "Think, Cade." Think, Sloane hissed, pressing close to his ear. "Your father is dead. He's out there rotting in the woods. That money belongs to us now. But I can't touch the offshore account without the second numeric key. He must have told you. He told you everything." "He didn't," Cade sobbed, tears cutting through the sweat on his face. "He knew. He always knew I was weak. He kept the money safe from me. Sloane, please. I'm dying." "Good." Sloane stepped back, her face turning into a sneer. "Then die. But do it quietly. I have 10 minutes to crack this before I have to start pulling jewelry off your mother's corpse to make tonight worth my while." She turned to the guard. "Get upstairs," she ordered. "Check on the team in the woods. If they still haven't found the old man, tell them to set the forest on fire. I don't care about the trees. I want bodies." The guard gave a nod and started up the spiral staircase. I held still until his footsteps died out above me. Now it was just the three of us, the Father, the Son, and the Devil in the crimson velvet dress. Sloane turned back to the laptop, her fingers hammering the keys, running through password after password. She was manic, frantic. Her greed was devouring her from the inside out. Cade's head rolled back. His eyes were drifting upward. He was slipping away. I couldn't wait for Obadiah. I couldn't hold out for the right moment to materialize. I rose from behind the wine crates, caked in mud, bleeding from a dozen gashes, holding a knife I had taken from a man I'd just run through an electrical current. I didn't look like a man of wealth. I looked like something that had clawed its way up out of the ground. I stepped into the light. "You're typing the wrong password, Sloan," I said, my voice low and flat. Sloan whipped around. The whiskey bottle slipped from her hand and exploded on the stone floor in a burst of glass and amber. She stared at me. Her mouth came open, but nothing followed. She looked at a dead man standing in front of her. Dad Cade breathed. "You're alive." I moved toward them, not running, walking with the heavy measured stride of something that cannot be stopped. Sloan clawed for the gun at her waistband. Her hands were slick, fumbling. "Don't," I said. She got the gun clear. She raised it at my chest. Her arm was shaking badly. "Stay back," she screamed. "Stay back, or I finish what I started." I didn't stop. I kept coming. "You can't finish anything, Sloan," I said, holding her eyes with mine. "You don't have the code. You don't have the money, and in roughly 15 minutes, you won't have your freedom either." I stopped 5 feet away. The gun barrel swung from my heart to my head and back again. "Go ahead and shoot," I told her. "Pull the trigger, but understand what happens. The second you do, the biometric lock on that trust fund seals permanently. My death trips a scorched earth protocol. Every single dime goes to charity. You walk away with nothing." Sloan went still. Greed and fear fought each other across her face. The gun dropped an inch. "You're lying," she breathed. "Test me," I said. I looked at Cade. He was watching me with something caught between awe and deep shame. "I'm sorry, Dad," he mouthed silently, and those 2 words hit like a fist. I looked back at Sloan. "Put it down, Sloan. This is finished. The police aren't on their way, but my people are, and they don't come equipped with handcuffs. They come with body bags." Sloan let out a laugh that had nothing sane in it. She backed up until the table stopped her. She looked at the laptop, then at me, then at the gun in her hand. "No," she hissed. "I came too far. I sacrificed too much. I am not leaving here with nothing." She raised the gun again, steadying it in both hands. Her eyes went flat. She had decided. She had chosen the abyss. "Say goodbye, Ez," she said. But before her finger could close on the trigger, a red dot bloomed on her forehead, then a second one on her chest. Through the high basement window behind her, through the howling storm, the hunters had arrived. The air in the wine cellar was thick with spilled whiskey and the smell of fear. I stepped out from behind the crates and into the hard white glare of the halogen bulb hanging above the tasting table, mud head to toe, tuxedo in tatters, face cut open in a dozen places where the forest had fought me on the way through. I must have looked like something conjured from a nightmare, but I didn't feel like a monster. I felt like a judge. Sloan spun so quickly she nearly went down. She seized the gun in both hands and leveled it at my chest. Her eyes were wild, bloodshot, careening between me and the laptop and back again. Her mind couldn't square what it was seeing. I was supposed to be a body out in the woods, a tragic accident, nothing more. "Stay back!" she screamed, her voice fracturing. "Stay back, or I put a bullet straight through your heart." I didn't stop. I took one slow, deliberate step forward. My cane struck the stone floor. Tap, 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 each one like a clock running out. "You can't kill a ghost, Sloan," I said, voice low and abraded. "As far as you were concerned, I was already dead the moment you poisoned that wine." She backed up until her hips met the heavy oak table where Cade sat slumped. Cornered. A cornered animal is dangerous, yes, but a cornered animal is also stupid. "Just give me the code," she shrieked, swinging the gun at me. "There's a secondary password for the offshore accounts. Give it to me. Give it to me, and I let you both walk out of here alive." I stopped 10 feet from her. I leaned on my cane and looked her over without hurrying. The crimson velvet dress that cost more than my father cleared in a year. The diamond earrings stripped from my wife's ears. The gun she was too frightened to hold straight. "You really don't understand what's happening here, do you?" I said, shaking my head. "You think this is a conversation about passwords, about wire transfers?" "It's about $5 million, Sloan screamed. "It's about my life. I am not going back to being no one. I am not going back to coupons in some dingy rental apartment. Sign the transfer authorization, Ez. Sign it, or I shoot your son right in front of you." She swung the gun to Cade's head. Cade groaned, his eyes flickering open, finding me with a look of pure shame and agony. I didn't flinch. I didn't plead. I laughed, dry, humorless. The kind of sound that made Sloan hesitate. "What's funny," she hissed. You are, I said. You think I accumulated what I have by building houses, Sloan. You think an empire gets built by pouring concrete and stacking bricks. Any fool can build a house. I got rich because I know how to manage risk. I spent 40 years seeing disasters coming before they arrived. Did you really believe I wouldn't see you? Sloane's brow tightened. What are you talking about? I slid my hand into my torn jacket pocket. She flinched, finger tightening, but I didn't produce a weapon. I produced a crumpled piece of paper. 3 days ago, I said, holding it up, I noticed you were asking a lot of pointed questions about my estate planning. Too eager, too helpful. And then I watched the way you looked at Cade after he lost that money. That wasn't love in your eyes. It was arithmetic. So I called my lawyer. Sloane stared at the paper. What did you do? I activated what my attorney calls a scorched earth protocol, I said, taking another step forward. I moved every asset I hold, company shares, real estate, cash reserves. All of it placed into an irrevocable blind trust 72 hours ago. Sloane's color drained. No, she whispered. That's not legal. You cannot move assets without spousal consent. You can when those assets are solely in your name, I said. And here's the part that matters, Sloane. The trust carries a very specific trigger clause. In the event of my death, natural, accidental, or otherwise, the entire trust liquidates immediately. So, the money goes to Cade. A flicker of hope crossed her face. It goes to your next of kin. I let myself smile. It was the coldest thing I have ever done. No, I said. I knew Cade was compromised. I knew how deep your hooks were in him. So, I changed the beneficiary. I took one more step toward her. If I die tonight, Sloane, if you squeeze that trigger, $5 million doesn't go to you. It doesn't go to Cade. It goes to the National Dog Rescue Foundation. The room went absolutely silent. The only sound was rain dripping from my clothes onto the stone floor. Sloane lowered the gun a fraction. Her mouth fell open. But she whispered, You told Loretta you needed pills for a sick dog. I said, You used a make-believe animal as cover to buy the poison meant for me. I thought that was poetic justice. If I die, my fortune goes to saving thousands of strays. And you get absolutely nothing. Not a cent, not a roof over your head, not even a car. You will be broke and you will be in a prison cell for murder. No, Sloane screamed. It was a sound of raw primal denial. You are bluffing. No one does that. No one hands millions to dogs over their own flesh and blood. I am not bluffing, I said, my voice flat as iron. I manage risk, Sloane. And I decided the dogs were a sounder investment than you. Sloane turned to the laptop. Her fingers flew across the keys, hammering in, password after password. Main account access denied. Backup account access denied. Zero balance. The offshore shell company account closed. She stared at the screen, the blue glow reflected in her eyes, which were brimming now with furious tears. Her entire plan, every scheme she had built, and every sacrifice she had made had just dissolved into nothing. It's gone, she whispered. All of it. She looked up at me. She looked at the gun still in her hand. For a moment I thought she might turn it on herself. But her hatred ran deeper than her despair. She leveled it straight at my face. Her hand had stopped shaking. If I can't have the money, she hissed, then I will settle for the satisfaction. I will kill you for free, old man. She drew back the hammer on the revolver. Click. I didn't move. I didn't shut my eyes. I looked straight into the core of her. Go ahead, I said. Make the donation. But she never got the chance. Just as her finger pressed against the trigger, a red laser dot materialized on her forehead, then another on her chest. Then 3 more scattered across her crimson velvet dress. The high windows of the wine cellar blew inward in a cascade of glass and rain. Drop it, a voice thundered from out in the storm. The hunters had arrived. The barrel of that .38 special had gone perfectly still. Sloane was beyond shaking now. She had moved past fear, past greed, into something darker. A place of pure nihilistic fury. She knew the money was gone. She knew the house was gone. And in the ruin of her thinking, the only way left to balance the ledger was to take the life of the man who had beaten her. I watched her finger press tighter on the trigger. I saw the muscles in her forearm coil. I didn't close my eyes. I didn't look away. I wanted the last thing she saw to be a man who felt no fear of her whatsoever. "Goodbye, Ez," she whispered, her voice trembling with hate. But the hammer never fell. In the sliver of a second before she could fire, a thin red beam cut through the cellar's gloom. It drifted across her crimson velvet dress, crawled up her neck, and settled dead center on her forehead. She blinked at it momentarily confused. Then a second dot appeared on her chest, right over her heart. A third landed on her gun hand. She went rigid. The truth landed on her like a physical blow. She was no longer the hunter. She was the quarry. Drop the weapon. The command didn't come from me. It came from everywhere, amplified through a megaphone, cutting through the roar of the storm, pouring in from the high windows behind her. Sloane wheeled around, eyes gone wide with terror. The reinforced glass of the basement windows exploded inward, not from the wind, but from boots swinging in on ropes. Flashbang grenades skittered across the stone floor. Bang. Bang, white light detonated in our eyes. The concussion wave rattled every tooth in my head. When my vision bled back, 3 men in full tactical kit were standing in the room. They moved with the fluid, deadly grace of apex predators. Every assault rifle in that room was trained on Sloane. Police, one of them announced, though, they were not police. They were something considerably more dangerous. Drop the gun, or we drop you. Sloane let out a shriek of pure frustration and hurled the revolver across the room. It skipped across the stone floor and spun to a stop at my feet. She collapsed to her knees, hands up, sobbing in great heaving waves. One of the tactical operators stepped in fast. He knocked her legs out from under her and pinned her flat on her stomach. He wrenched her arms behind her back, and the sharp ratcheting of zip ties cut through the noise of the room. Suddenly, the cellar was full of sound radio traffic boots on stone wind screaming through the shattered windows. A tall man in black gear moved through the chaos. He flipped up his visor, showing a face mapped with scars and years, but with eyes still sharp as cut glass. Obadiah. He crossed the room and put a heavy hand on my shoulder. Told you, we'd bring the rain. He said, his voice a deep grinding rumble. You cut it close, old friend, I said, leaning hard on my cane, my knees finally threatening to give out beneath me. Another 2 seconds and you would have been here for a funeral instead. Obadiah looked at Sloane squirming on the floor. He looked at Cade bleeding in the chair. He shook his head slowly. We've secured the perimeter, he said. The guards out in the woods have been neutralized. Non-lethal takedowns for the most part. Your wife is safe. My medic is with her in the shed right now. Loretta. I let out a breath that felt like I had been holding it for 40 years. Thank God. But Sloane wasn't finished. She wrenched her head up off the floor, spitting her hair away from her mouth. You cannot do this, she screamed. This is private property. Who are you people? You are trespassing. I will sue every one of you. Obadiah looked down at her with unconcealed contempt. We're just the cleaning crew, lady, he said. The real law is right behind us. As if on cue, the sirens reached us, not the lone wail of a county sheriff, but a full chorus of them. Blue and red strobed through the shattered windows, painting the rain in color. State Police, Sloane sneered. It doesn't matter. I paid Sheriff Hensley. He owns this county. He will sort this out. I limped over and stood above her. I looked down at the woman who had tried to burn my family to the ground. Sheriff Hensley isn't coming, Sloane, I said. And neither is anyone else on your payroll. What are you talking about? She twisted against the zip ties. I tapped the radio clipped to my belt, the one I had stripped off her guard. When I wired that radio in the shed, I said, I didn't just reach Obadiah. I patched into his tactical network. Every word spoken in this cellar for the past 20 minutes has been transmitted via satellite uplink directly to the North Carolina State Police headquarters in Raleigh. Sloane stopped moving. The fight went out of her face all at once. They heard all of it, I continued. They heard you confess to the poison. They heard you admit to shooting Cade. They heard you trying to drain the offshore accounts. They heard you threaten to kill me. You didn't just confess to me, Sloane. You confessed to the state attorney general. The heavy steel doors of the wine cellar burst open. Uniformed officers flooded in. Their shoulder patches read, North Carolina State Police. These were not men you could neutralize with an envelope of cash. These were men who put people like Sloane in cages and kept them there. They hauled her to her feet. Her legs wouldn't hold. They had buckled under the full weight of what she had done. Sloane Vreeland, an officer, read from a card, his voice ringing off the stone walls. You are under arrest for attempted murder in the first-degree kidnapping, wire fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. Sloane looked at me one final time as they dragged her out. The arrogance had left her. The greed had left her. What remained was something small and hollow, a frightened person who had played a game far beyond her and lost every piece on the board. She didn't scream. She didn't curse me. She let her head drop and let them pull her out into the storm. I turned to Cade. A medic was already cutting through his restraints and pressing against the wound in his shoulder. He was ash pale, but his eyes were open. He was watching the doorway where his wife had just vanished. Then he found me. "Dad," he whispered, tears running through the blood on his face. "I'm so sorry." I walked to him. I laid my hand on his good shoulder. "I know, son," I said quietly. "I know." But even as I stood there, I understood that while I had pulled him back from the edge tonight, what had existed between us was another casualty of this night that would not walk away unscathed. Some wounds heal, but some betrayals leave scars that never fade. I turned to Obadiah. "Take me to Loretta," I said. "I'm ready to go home." And for the first time all night, I allowed myself to feel every ache in these old bones. The war was finished. The vultures had been driven off. But the feast had left us all hungry for something no amount of money could purchase. Peace. 3 months have passed since the gavel fell, and the silence on our front porch no longer sits heavy. It is the sound of peace. Loretta sat beside me, her hand settled on my knee, a touch that said more than 40 years of marriage ever could. I straightened my glasses and gazed down the road toward the new development site, about a mile out. Even from that distance, the construction crew moved like specks against the rising skeleton of a new building. One figure held my attention, a man in a neon yellow vest, sweating under a merciless midday sun, lugging bags of cement one by one. My son, Cade. The prosecutor wanted to hand him 5 years. I rose in that courtroom, my cane shaking against the floor, and told them the truth. I testified that he'd been coerced, that he was foolish and greedy, yes, but he had been backed into that corner by men far worse than himself. The bullet wound in his shoulder was penalty enough for what he'd done, I argued. But this labor he's carrying now, that is the remedy for his soul. He phoned me last week. His voice was raw, his pride worn to nothing, asking for a small loan just to stretch until payday. For the first time in his life, I told him no. Not out of anger. I said it because I'd finally come to understand that my wallet had been his cage. Every dollar I'd ever handed him was another bar keeping him from growing into a man. Loretta squeezed my hand, drawing my eyes away from the worksite. "You did the right thing, Ez." She whispered it, her eyes wet but steady. I nodded, pulling in a long breath of fresh air, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I know I answered quietly. I watched Cade drag a sleeve across his forehead, set his jaw, and hoist another heavy bag. Sometimes, I told her, the greatest act of love is letting them stumble so they can finally find out how to get back on their feet. We made it through. Barely, but we made it. Looking back on everything, the poison, the lies, the sun. I almost lost to his own greed, the daughter-in-law who wore love like a costume. What strikes me most is how long betrayal can live in plain sight. It costs you things you can never fully recover. Time, trust, the easy sleep you used to take for granted. But I believe God doesn't let a man walk through that kind of fire without a reason. The ones who come out the other side aren't the same, but they are stronger. And sometimes the story of a family revenge story like ours is the very thing that saves somebody else from walking blind into the same trap. If you're an adults 50-plus listener who has ever felt like the people closest to you were building something behind your back, know that wisdom is your armor. It was mine. Here is what I'd tell any man or woman carrying a story like this one. Protect what you've built, not with anger, with strategy. A quiet move made early is worth more than a loud fight made late. Never let love be a reason to skip the hard questions. Kindness without discernment is not a virtue. It is a vulnerability. If someone is always the one who benefits when things go wrong, stop calling it bad luck. Start paying attention. And let your children fall when they need to. The most loving thing I ever did for Cade cost me nothing but the habit of rescuing him. If this story reached something in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below. I read more of them than you'd think. And if you haven't already subscribed to Honor Revenge Stories so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for spending this time with me. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next one.